we don't know each other very well, actually. We just, it's like when you go to boarding school, you know everyone. You kind of
Absolutely.
like, you're all kind of sisters, but you're not, because you're just living together.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, for the rest, actually, let's just go in there. Like, just tell everyone where you're from, who you are, just briefly, because we're going to get into obviously who you are, but I mean, just where you're from, who you are, and yeah, let's go in there.
Right. So I was born in Malawi, spent the first 9 years of my life there, and then went to boarding school in South Africa, so the Wickham Collegiate, and then finished school at St Anne's. Crazy times. I was a crazy little child. So, yeah, I was always in a lot of trouble. So that's why I had to move schools. And then studied in Cape Town, went to culinary school. Couldn't get a job in South Africa because of the whole affirmative action thing that had kicked in. So I had to come to Europe. I was forced to come to Europe at that point. England wasn't my first choice. I'd been to the States before and absolutely loved it, but couldn't get back in. It was just very difficult with visas and that sort of thing, and not having, the right qualifications, etc. So, and I was very, very young. So came over to England and I made this home. It's about 20 years now that I came over. And I literally just took every opportunity. I started from culinary school in South Africa, graduating and working at some of the best hotels out there. Came out here, but I started literally from sweeping floors in a bakery to working my way up to Michelin star restaurants, hotels, yachts, cruise ships for 5 years, and then eventually got into private service and
And then
became a
what?
private
Sorry, I
chef.
didn't hear you there.
Private service.
Okay.
And then I've worked my way right to the top. It's taken 20 years.
Yeah. And so what is the top? You say the top.
So being a private chef is very different to being in a restaurant or hotel. You have to have the same experience to work in someone's home, but this is at a very, very high level.
And so for what kind of people do you cook
Ultra high
for?
net worth individuals, the richest people on the planet, basically.
Really?
So very demanding, extremely demanding.
I love the way you say that. The richest people on the planet, basically.
Yeah.
Anyone interesting that we're allowed to know about? Or is this all confidential?
All confidential. Can't say anything.
Serious? Is
A
it so
lot
you
of
can't?
NDAs. Yeah, I've signed
Yeah, so
NDAs for pretty much every job. So,
really?
yeah.
Oh, I mean, why?
Just,
Why is that? I'm just curious. Why? Why? I
I
mean,
think
so
there's
what? You
two
cooked for them?
reasons. I think there's two reasons, Jen. One is security, definitely. Security for yourself and for them. I know one of my very, very first roles as a junior private chef, we had some training and they said to us, you've got to be careful. You have to have a cover story because you don't know who's talking to you for the wrong reasons, who might want to come into the house, who will get to know you to find out information about the family. So you've got to be quite careful. And then also you could get kidnapped for information and ransom. So you've got to be careful.
Yeah.
It's to protect
Okay.
you and to protect them.
Yeah.
But
And tell
also,
me.
if you think about it, it's your own home, right? It's your private house. So whatever goes on in your home, you don't want the world to know about it.
Yeah. Sure. Sure. So, I mean, yeah, true. But I guess, I guess these guys are also, they're always, well, I don't know exactly who they are, but I mean, in terms of just, well-known people, they often are, on their social medias, they are tagging a lot of the stuff that's going on in their house anyway. Do you know, this person did that person did that, and they sort of tag them in and let people know who they are. But I guess that's at their own discretion, not you doing it.
I think some of the people that I work for at this level now some have social media pages, but they run by a PA. It's very select things that they would post. Maybe it's charity, maybe it's just, things that they do. You wouldn't necessarily know. They might show you maybe family pictures but not all. It's very, very different. It's maybe more of a, I want to say, like when you see the Hollywood movie stars and, that maybe there's a Twitter or something. It's a little bit different. I think it depends where in the world as well. I've spent a lot of time in the Middle East. So culturally as well, things are very different. with people.
Okay. Yeah. And tell me, earlier on, you said that with, with the shift in South Africa, it was hard for you to find a job because did you never get a South African passport?
No. So I've had Portuguese and British.
Okay, so Portuguese is actually your background.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So tell me where your folks are from, both of them.
So my parents both were born in Africa. My dad was born in Mozambique, actually, and my mum was born in Malawi.
Okay.
Both my grandparents came out from Portugal. It was during the war, I think, way back when my grandparents settled, and I think that's how they got there. I didn't get to
Okay.
meet, a lot of them. So I
So
think they all
both
died.
sides are Portuguese.
Yes.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So
That's very
culturally,
cool.
I find myself being a global citizen. Having worked and lived everywhere. I think the first time leaving South Africa was really difficult. Not understanding Europe. Coming over for holidays was different. But coming to live here and understand the culture, I broke away from everything that was South African to get to integrate and to learn something new, and also just to get out of the mindset, because it was a very different mindset for me coming overseas. And even now, I think, when I've been back to Africa in the last couple of years, I struggle with the way I see how some family and relatives treat help back home. It just doesn't resonate with me, and I know we all grew up with nannies and we had help, and that's just the way Africa is, right? It's the way it is there. But when you're in Europe and other countries, it's very different. It's like I'm the help for the rich people now. Does that make sense? So I have a very different level of respect, and also the whole, the racism, the mindset, the education. So when I look back, there's a lot of people that I grew up with that I've really pulled away from, because we think very differently. I'm so exposed in comparison, and then we have nothing in common to talk about. And for me, people are people, and the more I learn about history, and when I travel and find out about cultures, you just learn to appreciate people and their hardships and where they've come from.
And also culture. I find from myself, having also been away for the last 22 years or so, and now obviously just coming back, I'm sort of craving that connection, that cultural connection here, which I find very hard to tap into. When you go to people's houses, and it's not about the grandeur of the house, which you find here, right? It's more about, let's cook together. Let's just spend the whole evening cooking together, and experiencing an evening of togetherness, as opposed to, right, you're here to eat, to entertain, and then go. I miss that sort of cultural element, maybe because I come from a cooking background as well, my husband as well. So, and in Europe, I've got so many friends who are from such different classes. Some live in small apartments, and some have big houses. But you tap into it's easier to tap into this multicultural mindset than, I guess, but I think everyone would have that when they go back to their home roots, like, because you grow up with certain ways,
No, there is a thing. I think my accent's very mixed. A lot of people think I'm Antipodean. They always think Aussie Kiwi. I'm like, no, Safa. But then I've lived all over the world. But when people ask me where home is, South Africa's home for me.
Even though, did your folks then move here?
No, it was always holidays. We always went home for holidays. But I think, I was 9 years old when I went to boarding school. By the time I was done university, you're like 20 odd, 24. So, I've spent so much time that it was ingrained in me. Everything I knew was, the South African culture, the way life is. It was very difficult at a young age, not understanding Afrikaans, not knowing where to start. That was very difficult. The first 2 years for me were very, very tough. But after that, making friends and being at boarding school, I didn't want to go home. There were so many other places to visit, and I think it's that Portuguese thing in the DNA, the explorer, right? You always want to travel and move about, and so I was very,
Yeah, wasn't Vasco da Gama Portuguese?
yes. Yeah. So
The
I've been
first
told
guy,
by
yeah, wasn't
somebody
he?
else in my life that, yeah, it's in your DNA, that's why you want to move around.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
exploring.
yeah, cool. So now, so talk to us. I'm hearing an echo. Are you hearing an echo? Just before we carry on, I need to check this because are you hearing an echo or not?
No, but the camera seems a bit slow. I think there's like a delayed when I'm speaking.
Okay, no, it's fine. Anyway, otherwise I give them a hard time in post production if there's any echoes. Anyway, so yeah, so tell us now about this journey. So why, first of all, did you study culinary?
It wasn't at the forefront of my mind. I never wanted to be in the kitchen growing up. Absolutely hated it, to be honest.
Mm,
I went to the States after finishing matric, and I went to a business school, graduated, and I still didn't know what I wanted to do, if that makes any sense. You kind of just followed, oh, what's everyone else doing, like a BCom or someone else is doing whatever, and you just follow what we were like sheep, basically. So
mm,
I wanted to explore, I wanted to come overseas, but I didn't know what. So I went on a J1 visa. I went to actually au pair and just travel. And part of my the package was I had to study and I had to find something to do.
mm,
So I thought, okay, well, I couldn't really cook very well at this point, and I was like, well, this might be very handy as a tool, so let me
mm,
find out about it. And I
mm,
went to a school on the East Coast, went to go and visit, and I absolutely fell in love with it. I saw a chef segmenting grapefruit and making something out of just the tools that he was and skill that he had to do something.
mm,
And I was like, right, okay, I think this is what I want to do. And then I went back to South Africa and I studied, and that was it, really. It just continued from there, and then obviously trained in South Africa. It was amazing. We have all the
mm.
wine farms. I was
Yeah.
exposed to amazing people.
Mm,
Came overseas, and I had to start from the bottom. So worked at all kinds of different hotels, restaurants, the freelance circuit, events. And then I had the bug to travel. So I was like, right, cruise ships are like the best culinary schools, really, because you meet a lot of people, you get to learn about different cuisines.
mm,
So I jumped onto those, and I was on for about 5 years, and then went on to like private yachting as well, which is completely different pressure. But when you're at sea, you lose touch with what's going on land. So when I came back, I had to keep, freelancing to go back and forth to understand, what the new trends are, what's going on in food, just to stay in touch,
mm,
really, because you do
mm.
lose touch depending where you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And over the years, Jen, and then from freelancing, ended up I think I did a season in Portugal where I ran a villa for the whole summer, had different guests coming in and out. Because to jump into private service, you can't just transition from being in a restaurant to a hotel and go and work in someone's house. It doesn't work like that. There's different
Mm,
protocol, different training. It's a very, very different mindset at that point, because you're in someone's home. So you have to have a certain temperament, etc. But by doing seasonal work and having the exposure of having different clients, understanding needs, demands, etc., it does help to then jump into a role. So I
mm.
managed to get into initially a few small jobs where it was a couple of weeks here and there, just to get get the feelers around. And that was it. I got into service, and my very first, it was a junior chef role. I ended up in Bahrain actually for 3 years.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting. Middle East, I'd never been to the Middle East. It was experience. It was great. I mean, my first year was amazing in the sense of, it was all new.
Mm,
Learning about, the desert is really hot culturally, the food.
yeah.
And I was very lucky that, the clients I was working for, they invested in me. So I got to train and learn all their food. And, it's another skill under my belt, basically.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just grown from strength to strength over there.
Mm,
And then up to, I would say, I've literally worked all over the world. My career has taken me absolutely everywhere. which has been great in one way. And I don't, regret or, harbor any hard feelings towards my career. But when the pandemic kicked in, that's when my life really, really changed. So I had a very high profile job. My story, I call, is from 6 figures to 0 and rebuilding myself during a pandemic. And that's, I think, my real story. I was working sort of 15-hour days, flying 3 times a week. My body was breaking down. My mental health was struggling. The amount of pressure that you were on because you're only as good as your last plate sent out. The politics involved at that level with staff, with colleagues. It's very debilitating. It breaks your confidence. So you're going through all kinds of things and still trying to survive and be like, well, I'm at this, this is the job. This is how it is. I didn't know any better. And then when the pandemic kicked in, there was a choice. So I was like, well, do I stay somewhere where I'm actually miserable? Yes, I have salary, but I'm miserable. I'm not enjoying this and I'm not doing what I really want to do. And I'd actually studied plant-based nutrition. I think it was a year or 2 before I'd gone out to this job. So I was like, well, I really want to focus on, food as medicine. And initially it was for myself. And trying to get my health better, because as chefs, we don't eat very well. We don't look after ourselves very well. So I came home. It was a very difficult decision. Obviously, I had to isolate on my own. So I had no income. I had absolutely nothing. It was like starting from scratch again. But I didn't know how to switch off. I didn't know how to take care of my mental health. I didn't even know what that really was at that point. You always hear about things, but you're just like, well, it's the nature of the job. This is how I feel. And in the middle of that, I can't remember how, but I learned about the Burn Chef project. And the Burn Chef project was set up for, initially, there was some coffee and talks for chefs, to just basically through this pandemic, because hospitality really got hit. And the Burn Chef project is all about mental health, eradicating the mental health stigma in hospitality, globally, if possible. That's kind of our aim. So I signed up. I became an ambassador for this movement. And I tell you what, the support I had throughout the pandemic was incredible. With some of the chiefs I have, the director, of the movement. They're just some amazing, amazing people I got to know. And also, you were having a hard day, you were on your own. We weren't alone. So we could have a Zoom call, we could jump onto calls and actually just speak. And it was a safe space to be able to speak about things. And then, I hit a depression for a while, Jen, because like most people, I got depressed. I didn't know what to do. I was like, well, what am I going to do with my life? I'm back in the UK. I can't work. And I had to set something up for myself. I had to survive. So, I had to have a really good talk.
Because where were you in Bahrain at that time?
No, I was actually in Jordan at that time before the pandemic.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I came back. So it was not an easy time, put it that way. I was absolutely exhausted. My body was completely knackered. There were so many different health elements. I've got 2 autoimmune conditions anyway. And they just, the pain was absolutely insane. Trying to take painkillers, you put on one bit of medication and then that counteracts something else. But then my lifestyle, the diet, all of that played a big role. So I had time to think about this, coming home, and I was like, right, okay, I need to get my health on track. My mental state of mind, what am I going to do? Refocus. After the pandemic ends, do I want to go back to this? No. Do I want to go back to, the stress and, absolutely, dealing with people that you come in as a genuine person, but the minute that a principal takes a shine to you or likes you, there is so much jealousy in this world. I've had to sacrifice holidays. I've had to sacrifice relationships. I've had to sacrifice, Christmas, birthdays. You don't have that in service. You basically, you give up your life for somebody else to work for them. And I got to a point where I was like,
and is this to work for the company or working for the
this is working for ultra high net worth.
Yeah, but so is it working? Because what I want to understand is, were you working for a company and then being subcontracted out to the high level
No,
individual.
you are basically at the level I've got to now as a private chef. I'm a consultant chef now, but I get headhunted for work. So everything depends on, yes, I have a website, which is my virtual portfolio. My LinkedIn profile is pretty much my business profile. So depending on what you have written there, your reviews, etc., people find me on there, you know, and jobs just get sent to me. They're like, oh, would you be interested in this? Would you be interested in that? And then sometimes before you have a conversation, you have to sign an NDA before you have that conversation. There will be an agent. There will always be somebody that finds me to place me. And then it's got to be a match. So with service, it's a 3-stage interview. You'll have an initial conversation with the person who's headhunting you or the agent. And then they'll present you to the client. So you'll speak to HR or you'll speak to PA initially. The client will then make a decision on whether they want you to come on board. You will then do a trial. In normal circumstances, you'd either be flown out for a couple of weeks or to go and cook, and they would taste your food, get to know you. You get to see the environment, understand, you know, what it's like, and see if you're a match, if you would like it, if you'd be happy, etc. So it's a process to actually get the job.
And is this working at their house and then just being
Private
their
residence.
personal chef for, like, you know, like Oprah has her personal chefs?
Absolutely. So we would be, sometimes there would be 8 to 10 chefs in one kitchen, but the kitchens are run like a professional restaurant. So you have the best of the best in your home. In some places, you know, you have chefs from every different nationality. So if you feel like pizza, you've got the best pizza maker. If you want Thai food, you've got a Thai chef. If you want, you know, Japanese food, you've got, you know, the best of the Japanese. So it's it's another level. It's very hard for the average person to understand sometimes. You know, sometimes I'll go into a job and I'm like, wow, okay, this is crazy. And it takes a while to sink in, you know, because the wealth is something else that you've never seen. I think one of the hard things for me, Jen, is there's been a couple of roles where, you know, I'm in service. Okay, I cook for the family, but then they also have animals. And I've had to cook for the dogs. And when I say cook for the dogs, it's not just a normal, you know, dog food or something like that. There's actually literally, you're making rice, you're making chicken, you're making, you know, mincemeat for them. They've got to have like a jus in a stock. I've had a role where literally every Friday night, the dog had to have 50 quid's worth of, it was a ribeye steak, but you set up a little tartan cloth. They had to eat out of a china bowl. I mean, it's to that extreme. And I think having grown up in Africa, you know, it's just such a different mindset. And I'm like, how am I cooking for an animal when there are people starving out there? You know, there are just a lot of things that didn't resonate. And then some families would, like on a Thursday, the dogs go for therapy. So massages and pampering, and they eat all this Ayurvedic food. And it really opened my eyes to what the rich and famous do. Sometimes I think there's just so much money and, you know, people find an opportunity to create things. I mean, I've worked at a hotel recently where, you know, it's a very high level hotel, but we had a dog menu. You know, these are things that actually exist. You know? So for the normal average person, you're like, what are you talking about? You know, you take your dog, and, you know, in England, there's so many pubs, you'll see people walking with dogs, etc. And then maybe they've got like water bowls or something like that. But at some of, you know, exclusive places, you'll actually have a menu where you can choose what your dog wants to eat. You know, so it's a very different lifestyle. And your mindset has to be in a certain, you know, you've got to be very, very strong, because you face opposition constantly as well. You will face opposition constantly. You are under the most insane pressure. I mean, people say to me, why don't you do MasterChef? Why don't you do any of this? I'm like, I don't need to. I said, the kind of people that I've cooked for, it's tougher than MasterChef. You know, you literally wait until that plate comes back to know if you're not flying home. You know, it's a very hard thing to do.
And tell me, what cuisine were you cooking for?
So I've pretty much cooked absolutely everything, Jen. I've had, you know, I've been lucky that I've had clients that have taken me to India. I've cooked Arabic cuisine. I've been trained, because obviously when you work for somebody, depending on their palate, you have to understand their palate, right? So I've been lucky enough to cook pretty much any cuisine there is on this planet. And then my main focus has been on food as medicine, detox and toxicology, using food instead of taking supplements to heal your body, to when you suffer from chronic illnesses, it's changing your diet, i.e. eliminating sort of gluten, dairy, and sugar helps with inflammation and bringing down inflammation. So that's been a lot of my focus. Also plant-based nutrition and eating more plants, that sort of thing, or having a varied diet. I've been working with a lot of different diets, over the years. Just depends on the client, on what they want and where they're at with things. So that's given me a lot of exposure. But then having the knowledge of cooking different cuisines, you can make healthy food a lot more interesting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure,
you
sure.
can impart the flavor profiles, that sort of thing into, for example, your cauliflower steak, but it doesn't have to just be something that's sealed. You could season that, you could marinate it with something, you could put it in a sous vide machine, create different textures and that kind of thing. So it allows you to be creative.
Yeah. So were you then, so from what I'm understanding, you were there employing you because of that knowledge, because of the sort of plant-based, the healing of the foods, that knowledge of the foods, as opposed to the sort of cordon bleu chef of wanting to present just the most beautiful little presentation. You were more the, almost maybe sounds like, based on what you're saying, also the everyday cook in a way, because
speciality. Yeah, but also understanding that I can cook absolutely everything. So from, if you decide you want to have, say, like a tapas evening, or you just want like a comfort meal, say like a lasagna and a salad, to having fine dining, you have to be able to do all of that. So you'll have days when the family will entertain, you'll have days when the family's just family, but like in the Arab world, it's very different, how they eat culturally. So if you have 6 people for dinner, you'll have enough food for probably 15 people. It's that sort of thing. Culturally, things are very different. So you learn as you go, to what the client preferences are. And if they like something, for example, I've been taken to hotels and restaurants that were the favorite restaurants that the client wanted to eat at. And I had those chefs train me and teach me the favorite dishes that my client liked to eat at the restaurant. Okay. So it's pretty cool. I mean, there's different, I've been taken all over the world, which is amazing to learn and to educate myself. And when you leave a job, you've got those skills, right? It's another thing under your belt. So that way, you just keep enhancing your skill set.
Yeah. Okay, so you were saying earlier that this is like the highest you could get to. I mean, that's in your opinion. Obviously, other chefs, their highest where they could get to is owning their own Michelin star restaurant.
Yeah. That Michelin star has never been something for me. I've worked at that level and I've absolutely hated it. I respect what the guys and girls do. But if I tell you something about hospitality, Jen, if you're working at Michelin star restaurants, you're definitely not paid enough. You're not looked after well enough. Yes, things are changing. And this is part of why I'm a Burnt Chef ambassador. Now that any site I go into, any hotel, any restaurant, any home, the mindset I have, the training I have is understanding that when you look after your staff, your clients, your principal, etc., will also be happy. Creating better workplace culture, feeding your staff. I mean, it's just basic, simple things, giving people breaks. And in Michelin star restaurants, you work super hard. The hours are super long. I haven't had the best experiences, to be fair. And, I remember sleeping on a park bench in London, and we were given scraps to eat, literally. It wasn't, a proper meal. The hours
back up there. Why were you sleeping on a park bench, and where and why?
In the afternoon, because there was nowhere for staff to go and sit, like even like a I want to say like a lounge or something, where you could just have a couch, or there's a TV, or there's internet available for staff to just have a bit of downtime before the next shift. So you were doing, I think at the time it was like 16-hour days. So I couldn't go home and come back. So I had to go and find a park bench, chuck my backpack on it and just lie down for a bit and then go back onto a shift. That's not the ideal situation, and then you're not being fed properly. So it was like scraps. So if there was salmon or whatever it was, I mean, I've had food poisoning from staff food. There's moldy blue cheese going off somewhere, and put it in a pasta, and quite a few of us got very, very sick from it. So, you know, people see the glamour and they look at TV and they think, oh, chefing, and oh, it looks so amazing. And yes, it is an amazing journey, but they don't realize what really goes on, you know, behind the scenes, and how difficult it is, the amount of pressure you are under.
Yeah. So tell me, so in hearing just now this bit of your story, I'm hearing a lot of intensity, a lot of not resentment, but it's not someone talking about a space and time of their life that is joyous and light and in flow. And so what's going on here? And
I think a lot's changed for me when, you know, I would say the last 2-3 years, I've learned a lot more, I guess, you know, moving up the ranks. And also the pandemic gave me a lot of time to reflect. Before that, I didn't know any better. So as a chef, you're just like, well, these are the hours you accepted. Oh, well, these are the conditions we accepted. Oh, this is the pay we accepted. We didn't know any better. Things are changing so much, and it's understanding. I think knowledge is power. Having retrained, understanding that we are, you know, it's an absolute essential must to look after people at work, you know, pay them well, feed them well, look after them, give them enough time to recoup. I mean, in private service, bless you,
thanks.
You can work 6-7 days, you can work 10 days sometimes and not get a day off. And when I'm saying 15-hour days of intensity, sometimes you're sitting around, you're not always on your feet that 15, but you are on call. It's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting. And then you have maybe a day off. Your body needs more than that to recoup. You're not eating well, so your immunity is going down. Then you get sick, etc. And then, you know, it's a vicious circle from there. So now that I know those things, you know, well, the realization and, you know, I guess an awakening's happened for me. I cannot go back into situations and jobs just because it pays X amount of money, or, you know, someone thinks, oh my God, it would be, for example, I've had, you know, a Richard Branson job land on my lap. Everyone would know who he is. And, you know, most people are like, oh, I'd love to work for Virgin. Yes, it's an amazing company, etc. But the job spec was definitely it was a junior role. They weren't paying enough, and you're going to be stuck on an island. So as a young chef, I'd probably be like, yes, amazing, I want to go. Where I am now, I look at the situation and I step back and I'm like, really? Okay, so you're going to be on an island. You've got to think about that. You're lonely. You've got no support. How do you get your supplies in? The kind of stress levels you're under. You know, communicating with other people. It's like when chefs go out to the Maldives and they work there. I've had a chef message me and, you know, his mental health struggling because there's no life, right? So you have a job, but you're not enjoying it. So what's the point, right? That's where I'm at. So I'm saying, right, I want to enjoy what I'm doing. I want to teach, I want to mentor, and I want to inspire. And yes, every situation, you know, builds you to be the person you are. And I definitely believe that the strength, you know, I call myself the phoenix rising out of the ashes, because that's how I feel with a lot of things that have happened. But I wouldn't be the chef I am today if I'd also hadn't been through a lot of those things, you know. I'm a very paternalistic leader. I've learned from, you know, culinary directors and executives that I've had. I've learned from them on, you know, you're only as strong, you're in a head position because of the people who put you there. But when you come down, because not everyone stays at the top, you still got to see those people. So the way you treat people, your mannerisms, your respect, you know, everything rolls down. So if you don't take care of people, you're not going to get very far. You know, you have to realize that it's teamwork and taking care of, for an example, the most important person for me is the person that washes pots. And I'll say this to you, that in the UK right now, we are over 800,000 chefs short in the industry, and globally it's a problem. So I've been to a site where I've had to cover a head chef. I didn't have enough plates on the pass to send out my food because we didn't have someone to scrape and load a machine. There was no pot washers, there was no KPs, so the chefs were having to wash their own pots and do service. It's not fun at all, you know, and it's a lot of stress to be under. So the mental health part of, I think it's any job that you're in, you need to be happy. You need to be like, right, why am I doing this? Is there a purpose? What is the end goal for me? And I think
Yeah.
that's where
So,
I've got to.
yeah. So earlier on, you said, I'm hearing an echo. Are you hearing an echo with me?
No.
Don't know why I'm hearing this echo. I hope it's not going to go through in after production. But so earlier on, you said all the difficult things I've experienced. What are you referring to?
So as a woman in the hospitality, I've had a lot of challenges. One, being female, you're treated differently in the kitchens. The sexual harassment, the abuse. I've been through all of that. I think the first time that I didn't even know what it was called at the point. I was on a cruise ship actually, and he was one of my senior chefs. And I'd walked into a fridge to go and get some produce, and he came up and he was groping my boobs, and I was like, "What the hell are you doing?" And he's like, "He would make my life easier, if I would sleep with him." And I was like, "You must be crazy," And I pushed him aside, and I went to go and report it. But you go through. There's so much that you'll be thrown with as a woman. You have to. It's almost like I've felt I've had to work a lot harder to gain the respect of my peers, especially with the men in the industry. You have to work a lot harder. It's like they test you to no end. It's definitely more challenging as a woman, and you have to be a certain. They will break you, put it this way. They will break you and remold you. So you need to be super strong inside, and have a mindset of, right, if I want this, I'm going to do it regardless. So it hasn't been easy.
What happened when you reported that guy? Did something happen, or?
The executive chef was not the greatest person, to be honest, on that boat. Reported it. I think the guy was blacklisted. I ended up leaving ships and I transferred somewhere else. And I was just told that he would be dealt with, but no immediate action was taken. And this happens a lot, in the industry. There's a lot of abuse. And when you're young and you don't know any better, a lot of people fall into that. There's women that have been raped on board. There's been so many different things. So I've learned to be so strong in the point where if someone tries to grope me, especially a man, I will take my knife and I'll grope him and I'll ask him how he likes it. But that's how it's made me become, so I've become I can become a dragon if I need to be. But it's the industry pushes you to a point, because if you soft and I don't know how to say this. It's almost like if you have the nature of how you have to be in a kitchen sometimes is you've got to have this tough shell. You've got to be able to, you don't break. This is one thing. So like, say your executive was screaming at you for something, and, when you're training, you get yelled at all the time because you're like, oh, you're an idiot. Oh, you don't know how to do this, and you'll never amount to doing that. And they break you. Some of these chefs are really, really demonic in some ways. I call them movie stars, to be honest, because I'm like, well, how do you expect someone to come up? You've got all the skill and experience. Train people, right? So
Yeah.
It's been a tough journey in that respect, but at the same time, I beg someone to try today.
Yeah.
But I also speak out because I know there's women out there that have gone through it and they can't speak about it, because they're either too scared or it's an embarrassment. I'm like, it's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. You're put in this victim thing. But what I would say is a lot of the other companies, like the company I transferred to, it was a different kind of harassment I went through, but the captain of my ship was amazing. And he put procedures in place. And I mean, those guys were not even allowed to be on the same elevator if they saw me. If they saw me in a staircase, they better move, and there were a lot of things.
But surely you don't want that. You don't want that. I mean, it's not like you're the anti-man,
No.
I mean, right? So
I think I was the only female in a galley of 200 guys. I was super determined to move out of, I was put into, it was an a la carte restaurant to run with the team. And I did it for a while, but then I got bored. So, I would go to my executive and I would say, well, I want to move into like the fine dining side of things. And I really want to go and, learn something different. And Michel Roux Senior at the time was one of the patron chefs on board. and I wanted to go work with him. I was like, well, this is an opportunity. If you don't ask, you don't know. And I was put through a test. And I was told that, I had to make sure the restaurant was running, and I had to cook a meal for all my corporates, the captain and the executives that night. And I did.
What did you cook
and
them?
Yeah. And basically,
What did you cook them?
I actually made them with seafood. It was a seafood dish. So I kept it simple. I kept it really, really simple, but I kept the flavors quite. I brought the whole Portuguese flair to it. And, the criticism was constructive. I hadn't loosened, I think, the meat from the shell. I mean, I was really young. I was in my 20s, so, there was so much to still learn. But I mean, the next day I was called in, and, a lot of them were French. So basically, I just remember them saying, Halima, it takes a lot of balls to do what you did. And a lot of the other sous chefs would never do this. So I was promoted, and I got the job. So I've also learned that if you want something, go for it. If you don't ask, you don't know. And I've learned to get, you just learn to be more gutsy, I guess, and I think that's the only way to progress sometimes. You have to just take it and say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to know if I don't try. So keep going at it.
Okay. So, I mean, when I hear you talk also, you are also talking like, do you want people to be chefs? Like, do you want to inspire people to be chefs? Do you not care about that? That's not sort of where you're at in sort of your message with me today. I mean, because it's just, everyone knows the chef world is crazy, right? But, if it's in you to cook and you have this passion to cook, it's there. It's you can't take it away. So what are you actually trying to say then to those people?
I'm being real with people, Jen. I think what I want to say is, I think it's glamorized. Chefing can be so glamorized, especially on TV. And, you see all these celebrity chefs and people think, oh my God, wow, that's so amazing. And yes, it is. But the reality of what really goes on is what I want people to be aware of. Yes, I believe we need to train more chefs. We need to educate and mentor a lot better. We need to change the culture in our industry. And this is why I'm part of the Burnt Chef project. This is what we aim to do. It's looking after, the mental health of people, which we've never had. We've never had this support. We've never had people saying, it's okay to not be okay. Because in the chefing world, I mean, I've been through it, the drugs, the alcohol, the unsociable hours, relationships fall apart. It's all part of it. But it doesn't have to be that way. And this is where, by bringing up the younger generation is saying, we still need you. We desperately need you. The industry is dying at this point. But let's just be real about what does happen and where the support is and what's allowed and what's not allowed. I think this needs to be spoken about a lot instead of glamorizing and saying, oh, yes, I've just graduated from, whatever college or whatever, and I'm going into a restaurant and, oh, there's only Michelin star. No, there are so many different avenues of becoming a chef. It's not just restaurants and hotels. There's banqueting, there's catering. You've got yachts, you've got cruise ships, you've got private houses. There's so many different things. You can become a nutritionist. You can work on meal plans. There's so many different avenues. Being a personal chef and a private chef, they're two different things. One, you have more clients you do meal plans for. The other one, you're actually solely working for a family. So it's also exposing what you can do with this career and saying it's not just a restaurant and a hotel, and Michelin star isn't everything. It's not everyone's goal. And it doesn't mean that, you're not as good, because I'll tell you now that a Michelin star chef is good at, doing a few plates really, really well. But if you throw them into a production kitchen where you have to do hundreds and thousands, i.e. say cruise ships, they struggle. I've seen it, so everyone has their strength. And I say, yes, work, train, educate yourself. I think it's important to work at that level to understand what goes on. There's a whole different sort of mindset to working in those kitchens. But I'm also saying, be aware of how you treated. Certain things are not okay, but there still is a love and a passion for the industry, but just wanting to change and make things better for the next generation that comes up.
So obviously in connection then with this burnt chef project, but also, what you're saying in terms of, we need to protect, we need to, we need to have these systems in place to also make the industry more aware of what's going on. But I mean, surely it's just about actually changing the ethos at the core so that you don't need these burn chef things in place. You know what I mean? It's like having a pill to feed to instead of, which is ironic because you deal in sort of natural medicines of the food, right? Which is all about, so if you eat correctly, then you won't get sick. You won't get all these dysfunctional, things going on in your body. In the same way with chefing, if the ethos just at the core, just like the ballet world, corrects itself, then you don't need all these psychological systems in place to be the pill of the problem.
I think it's educating the right people, and what we aim at the Burn Chef is training and educating, the leaders and the management to be able to manage their teams better, to be able to cope. Because, I did a lot of training over the pandemic. That's something I really did. I think I must have done about 12 certificates in different things, just keeping my mind busy. But I learned so much. And it was like the awareness for mental health first aid, and understanding that you might have someone at work who has some sort of a disorder, and you give them an instruction and they can't follow it, but you need to understand what's going on in their head, So in the industry, it hasn't been, I wouldn't say hospitality is the most gracious, it is changing. But people have known it to be a certain way for centuries, that it's going to take a lot of time to then change that ethos, to get people on board, to say, right, let's train our management. Let's have somebody in place who understands mental health first aid, who can identify, who can help. Let's provide support to people who are struggling, and be able to offer the support needed to help our teams grow better. Does that make sense? Instead of, having high staff turnovers, let's, learn to target those problems, mentor well, teach well, speak to people correctly. You don't need to shout. And it's something that you trained in the industry. You see chefs, you look at Gordon Ramsay, that's a no, you can't do that anymore, Jen. It's just not allowed anymore. People won't tolerate it, especially with the way the industry is now. I've walked into sites where, I've walked in and I've walked out because I'm like, no, you must be crazy. There's no way I'm going to go in and put up with that. So people are becoming more aware of what's.
When have you walked in and walked out? What scenarios?
Conditions. One, how the chef treated you. I literally walked in. I was freelancing. Someone was having a bad day, and as I was walking through the door, spoon comes my way. It wasn't necessarily aimed for me, but when you're walking in and that happens to you, and there's a lot of tension and people are screaming and swearing, and chefs, we've got mouths like sailors, and I was like, right, okay, I've come here to help you. I don't need your attitude right now. You might be having a bad day, but you don't need to take that out on me, and I was like, well, cheers, goodbye. If that's how you're going to treat me, I'm out. And I've done that twice. So I'm like, depending on how you treat me is the reaction that you're going to get from me.
And what kind of events were these? Paint the picture.
One was an event company and one was a restaurant. So the events companies also have their own, dramatic kind of thing that happens there. It's very cliquey. If you don't fit in, if you don't have the right face, if you, they might give you a bag of onions to peel all day if they don't like you. And they just think, oh, they don't know your skill set. So they could throw you doing a job and you'll be doing one job all day for hours, which is so draining. Like your brain I can't do canapes, for example, like hundreds and thousands, forget about it. I'd rather buy them in, or I'd, do something else. There's no way in hell I'm going to sit there and cut out 300 blocks of pastry and mold them at this level. No, there's companies that produce this at a really good level. So why not buy certain things in and maybe make the fillings? And, it's just a mindset of some people, I think, enjoy that abuse. It's almost like, oh, they knew, we can just give them all the crappy jobs to do. It does happen a lot. And then the head chef he was super stressed. He'd been under a lot of pressure because he'd taken over from somebody else, but he was also freelancing. And I walked in, introduced myself, and he was just not the friendliest of sorts. And I was doing something. I think I was boiling pasta.
Yeah.
And I don't know, he started to have this attitude with me. So, right, okay, I get this, I'm Portuguese, I'm not going to take this. So,
Mm,
and
mm.
I've got a temper. So then I kicked off and I was like, I'm sorry, you will not talk to me that way. Give me an instruction. Tell me what you want done. Fine. But speak to me in a certain manner. Otherwise, you can do this on your own. And I'll walk out. So I think after everything I've been through in the last 20 years to get to where I am today, there's nothing I won't tolerate. And I won't tolerate people bullying my staff, my teams. I won't tolerate it. It will be nipped in the butt straight away. I take no prisoners. If there's any drama, in kitchens, there always is, depending on the alcohol levels. We've had this recently, we've had a chef arrive on site absolutely drunk, couldn't even stand up, then I've
For
had
what?
chefs,
For what project? For what?
just freelancing, coming in to help out, because at the moment, especially in the UK, trying to find good chefs to do jobs right now is really, really difficult. This guy came in from an agency to help out. He couldn't stand up. He had to get sent back in a cab, So, but then why has he got to that point? And then after service, you'll see a lot of the guys drinking, but it's not just one drink or two drinks. I'm talking 6, 7, 8. It's 2:00 in the morning before they're going to sleep. So they're smoking, they're drinking, and then some of them, there's Coke involved, and I get it. It's like your de-stress time, your decompress time before you go to bed, because you're so wired, the adrenaline's so high, and you need something to kind of take that down. But there are healthier ways of coping, and this comes from the top. And yes, there are a lot of places, there are a lot of great places that I work at where, on a Friday and Saturday night, you've had a really, hectic shift. You've had a lot of people in, they buy you a drink. Alcohol's a big thing. I don't really drink so much anymore, but I'm happy to have a glass here or there. But the extensive sort of drinking all night, partying all night, trying to go into shift the next day, it's just not,
Not conducive. And tell me, did you were you in that space before?
I did. I've been down the drug and alcohol route. It's to help you. I think when you're doing 16, 18 hours a day, you're under so much pressure. And when your head chefs are like, right, okay, they give you a pill, or here's a line of Coke, or, this is going to keep you going. And then you see what that does. It keeps you, cocaine keeps you on this, I don't know how to say it. It's almost like you're awake, and I think this is why chefs get so addicted, because you're exhausted. Your body's beyond exhausted, but then you take these recreational drugs, and then it gives you that extra boost for X amount of hours. But the come down from that is detrimental to your health. It's absolutely dangerous. So, I've been there where I actually got sick. My chefs were giving me pills, and this started from South Africa in Cape Town. And, here's a pill, and my pupils
What kind of pill?
I can't even remember what they were at the time, but it was more like, I guess it was sort of like an ecstasy or something back in the day. Again,
and would this have been after the shift or during the shift?
After. Sometimes half day. So you'd be in the kitchen, say 8 o'clock till, say, maybe 3, 4 o'clock. And then they'd be like, okay, have an hour off. And that's when, maybe a drink would happen or some drugs would be taken to then get the next part of the day done. So you'd be back in, service would then start 5:36, and then you work until 11 or whenever you finish.
And over how long were you sort of regularly taking?
In and out, I would say in my 20s, really, a couple of years in and out.
And what made you stop?
I got very sick. I remember I drank so much that I'd passed out for 9 hours, didn't even know where I was.
Where were you working at the time?
I was in South Africa, actually. I remember being in South Africa with friends, and it was actually, we'd finished some work, and, it was a whole evening that we'd been out to, and there are all these parties that get arranged that you don't know about until the night before. So it's for doctors, lawyers, and chefs. And then you get a message, depending if you're in that group or, if you're in the association of it, oh, this venue, this is going on. So you go, and then that's what it is. You drink, there's drugs and all of that, and that's the, you know, the event of the night. And
What do you mean? What do you mean, doctors,
doctors,
chefs,
lawyers, and chefs
lawyers? Yeah. What do you mean? Why?
have such high stress thresholds that they are, in the past, there have been certain groups where, because of that, they are, I'd say, for example, there'd be a restaurant, and then you know, it would be a network of people wanting to decompress, and they'd be like, right, this venue drinks, or there's a party on tonight. And it would mainly be from these three professions that people would meet because of the stress levels that they were at. And there'd be a rooftop
So was it for that
party.
reason? Was it for that, like that?
Decompress.
It would
Yeah.
decompression party.
Yeah, pretty much. Decompression party. Have drinks, and you know, take whatever whatever was there. You know, the menu was open to whatever you're into. So, but yes, the feeling that you have, you know, for the first couple of hours, but when you're coming off that, it's not fun. And I got very sick, very, very sick. And that was one of the impetus to change. And then the other thing that helped was when I got into private service, you get everything tested. Your hair samples, urine samples, stool samples, you name it, your blood, everything gets tested. So if there is a sign, cruise ships do the same, they will test you. So if any narcotic is found in you, that's it, you're over. Even something like codeine, if it's not prescribed, you will lose your job. So that was a good thing. It was a very good thing for me, because it kept me clean for about 12 years.
Although, having said that, I mean, I was at ironically, you're talking about the cruise ships. I was at a party a couple of weeks ago, and through my neighbors. Anyway, it was a 30th birthday. It made me feel so old, since I'm now, like, you know, early 40s. But they were all taking what's that, MDMA.
Yeah.
And I'm not, look, I've had some drugs before, but it's never really been my jam. I'm not
No.
like, I like having
No.
wine. I'm like a wine girl. I like having,
Yeah.
I can have, you know, but I don't like feeling shit the next day. But I
No.
mean, you know, sometimes you just do, and that's life, right? You just have a good party,
Exactly.
and you know. But I like to generally be you know, in control of my energy and that
That's
sort of
it.
thing. But I also like to have a good party, so I do
Yeah.
let my hair down, and I'll, you
Yeah.
know, I'll very easily enjoy quite a bit of wine. But anyway, the whole drugs thing's not really my thing. But anyway, so and ironically, these guys had all been working on the ships, and so while you do get tested to get in the job, once you're in the job, you're exposed to a lot of drugs.
You can be. There's a lot that goes on. I mean, it's a lot stricter now, but it depends on the countries you travel to. You know, I was never one to jeopardize that sort of a situation, because I've seen people locked up. I've seen guys on cruise ships where, I mean, things have changed. You know, this is years ago. I was on the last boat I was on, I think, is 2009, and a lot's changed since then. But you know, I spent, the longest I'd been on a boat was 8 months. Some guys were spending 10 months on a boat. So imagine, you haven't seen your family. You know, you living in this tiny space, you traveling around the world, yes, but life isn't that great. And I remember there were one or two guys that had asked, and they'd requested, they said, we want to go home. And they were denied to go home. And we were in Italy, I think. We were in a port in Italy. And one of the guys lost it. He actually got arrested. He went to go and punch a car window because he wanted to get out so badly, you know. So, you know, that's mental health.
And who, I mean, you don't have to tell me who, but what sort of industry client were you working for?
No, that was on ships.
That okay,
when I was on ships. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was on ships. In private service, that will not be tolerated at all. You probably won't get the job, because in service, before you get a job, especially when you work overseas, you'll have a test before you fly. When you land, you will be tested again for absolutely everything. Sometimes you won't even know what they're testing you for. When you're cleared, then you can go in. And then it's random testing as well. So if for any chance, and you know, God forbid it's Sharia law or something else, you don't want to be in a country where you can be in prison, put it that way. So you have to be very careful, and you have to think before you do silly things like that. But on ships, you know, on yachts and things, it happens, you know. And I think there's still people today. There's I mean, recently we've just had something, I think in the last 2 weeks, on there's a lot of spiking in drinks in clubs. There's a lot of needles and things being stuck into people in clubs as well. I mean, there's a whole thing going on here. I don't know if you guys have heard about it. And a lot of the women have been boycotting and not going to clubs and clubbing over the last couple of weeks. So I don't know what's happened, you know, to the world, but there are a lot of crazy things going on. And I think you have to just be, you know, we all try things, you know, that's part of life, you know, but addiction and all of that is a very real problem. I have clients that, you know, are recovering addicts, but I mean, if you see where they are from where they were, it's phenomenal, the amount of work that they do, but it's also mindset, it's the support, it's the coping mechanisms. And then some of them will say, well, we've lost a lot of friends. I'm like, well, clearly they weren't friends if that's the way they wanted you to go. So if you're cleaning yourself up, they should be supporting you. That's a real friend, you know.
So tell me, do you ever connect on a personal level with your clients, like when you're working in these houses?
Some yes, some no. Some it's very some of them you summoned, put it that way. If they want to talk to you, you summoned, or it's a phone call. Some of them I am very forward facing. But I've also had situations, Jen, where this was actually 2 years ago, where I had a job in the Mediterranean. I actually suffered from PTSD after a job. I walked out 2 days before I was supposed to fly out. I was with the family for a couple of months on vacation, working for them. But the conditions and everything.
What kind of family was it? What, like, don't say names.
Can't say names. High net worth, very, very high net worth. You know, based in the UK, have homes around the world, that sort of thing.
Business people.
Business people, yes, they were business people. But the way they treated their staff left a bad taste in my mouth. And I got to a point where I got so tired. I held my tongue, ate the humble pie. An example, first thing in the morning, you know, I'm making breakfast for like the kids, and the client walks in and asks me to make, they wanted to make some buckwheat pancakes or something. So I'm just getting the mix ready. And then literally, excuse me for swearing, she's like, just don't fucking do that. Leave it alone. I'm going to fucking do that. For no reason. First thing in the morning, and you swearing at me? I was like, well, okay, I'm not your slave, you know, for one. I'm here to help you, and I'm a professional, and that's why you've hired me, but you will not speak to me in that manner. You know, literally, that's how they speak to some of their staff. And I was like, no, I'm sorry. This is not, this doesn't work for me. But it was constant.
But did you say that then at the time in front of the kids, or what played out?
Basically, I held my, I didn't do it in front of the kids. I kind of, you know, chose the moment. And what really kicked off for me was I had some of the staff snooping through like my notebooks for recipes and things like that without asking me. And for any chef, that's just, you don't just do that. You know, you have the respect. It's like going into someone's handbag. You don't go into a knife wrap. You don't just go into people's stuff. And that was it for me. I packed up my knives, left them on the counter, and I went to find the client. And that was it. My temper was beyond. I had to still keep myself composed, if that makes sense. And I always believe still be professional, but I was firm. And I was like, right, I want to get off. I'm done. And I'm out of here. This is not acceptable. And they tried to manipulate. They tried to scaremonger. They tried to break me down. And I said, I didn't get to where I am today because of you. Because of who I am is how you found me. So I don't need you. You know, and I was happy and I paid for my ticket and I left. So, you know, that was one of the times when I decided that, you know, I was hanging up my apron for private service. That was one of the days that I was like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I will not, you know, accept this behavior. It's not right to make people work 17-hour days and underpay them and, you know, agree to something and then change things. It's not okay to just scream and yell at people and be bipolar. You know, if that's your condition, fine, take medication for it. But you will not get happy staff. you
Says
know.
you, who's into nutritional medicine,
Oh,
medicinal
it's
food.
crazy.
Yeah.
It's just, I think, there's so many things to eat and to build your serotonin levels, and, sunlight, for instance, is such a great thing. We've had something go out saying, with the weather changing over here, you need to increase your vitamin D levels. You need to make sure that you're getting some form of sunlight, eat lots of tryptophan and certain foods that help to build your serotonin, which keep your mood levels at a better, at a happier kind of space. So, all of that happens, but imagine you've got, it's snowing. It's not great to work in the snow either, working in the Alps or somewhere. It's not great. People are like, yes, you go skiing, but it does get you have that when you're alone out there for a long time, you feel sad, you feel lonely, you can get depressed. And then imagine you have clients that then throw all their stuff on you and treat you badly. It's a recipe for disaster, really.
So at the beginning, when you said, I've reached the top, like there's no, there's nowhere more I can go. I mean, surely this is, by the way you talk about this is not the top.
So where I am now in private service, I've worked at the highest level I possibly can, so I can't go any further. Where I'm at now is consultancy level. So project managing, training, mentoring, teaching, and also I'm transitioning into the wellness sort of things. So using food as medicine, staying in food because I love it, but using it to help people, using it to better somebody else. So I've teamed up with a gym close by where I can set up detox clinics in the gym, as well as having them online, but going in to see the client, working on a workout program, because everything I do is bespoke for the client. So from the nutritional side of things, the detox side of things, it's all bespoke to the client. Everyone's different. Everyone's body's unique. Your needs are not the same as the next person's. What you eat and they can eat, it's not, what will agree with you might not agree with somebody else. So for me, it's working with people on a very real level, helping them overcome conditions. And my naturopath has said to me that my ideal client is me because, I have two autoimmune conditions. One's kicked off from the other, and this is from stress. My career has broken my body down over the years without realizing it. And now I want to, train and specialize to be able to help other people with chronic illnesses, chronic pain, and to be able to eat and drink and educate them to make better health choices, to stay healthy and for longevity. So that's sort of where I'm at as, going forward. It's definitely wellness, setting up global retreats, even in-house sort of spa days in people's homes, that sort of thing, and bringing on the network of amazing professionals and colleagues and friends that I have to be able to make this happen. So
but don't you think then, like you talk again about, you definitely have an intrigue and a pull towards the in-house in people's homes. What is it with that? What's your connection with that?
I think I enjoy a lot of the personal touch. I really enjoy getting to know people and being able to then provide a service that you can see the outcome. And when people say, when I do a private dinner party, for example, or, a bespoke event, and, when my clients at the end of the night are pouring me a drink and are just so happy and have loved absolutely everything. And they're like, no, you're staying on to party with us. It's such a great feeling to know that you've exceeded expectation, but also working for somebody and say, you've done something amazing and you've brought some happiness into someone's life. I think, there's no better feeling than, I had a client, I helped launch a brand the other day that I've been doing some development for. And my client's, family came up to me, and the client's mother actually came up to me and said, she gave me a hug and she just said, thank you so much for being there for my son. Thank you for supporting him throughout, this really difficult period to get a business to launch and develop, and, so many hours. And it's been 18 months of, I've been involved for about 18 months. And, the appreciation, Jen, is something that chefs don't get a lot. And I think I'm somebody who needs words of affirmation. That's sort of like one of my love languages. I do well
Mm,
when I'm appreciated. I
mm,
think most
mm,
people do. It's nice
mm.
to be appreciated. And a lot of the time in other environments, you're not always appreciated the same way. You won't get that recognition. Whereas in service, it's you, it's your name, right? So it's your reputation on the line.
Yeah,
Not only that, but it's the way you present yourself and, the relationships you build with people from that. That's really important for me.
yeah. So, I mean, I can imagine though, even still, though it's in the health industry, when you go back into these homes, you're still going to get these tight-assed, pain in the
Yep,
ass clients,
you
right?
do.
Even though it's for health, you're still going to get the same amount of pressure and rudeness.
Stress. You do. I think there's a certain way of, put it this way, Jen.
Mm,
Everyone, you have a choice, right? So in the past, it's been, oh my goodness, this job opportunity is there. And you take it because it's almost like we undervalue ourselves.
mm,
Now I'm saying, well, you, the client, this is what you want, but I get to choose if I want to work with you or not. You see, I've got to the point where I pick and choose. I say yes or no. You might want me, but I might not want to work with you. And I don't have to, right? So this is where I'm at. I always have a consultation. I have a free consultation. It's usually about half an hour, 45 minutes. We get to speak, whether it's over Zoom or try and meet over a coffee pre-pandemic. And, you see if you eyeball each other. Do we get on? Is there a click? Is there a connection? Because when you're working with someone in their home, there needs to be some form of a connection. If there isn't, it's not going to work.
mm,
So
mm, mm.
understanding, someone's house is someone's house. So you're working in there, but then they might have kids running around. So if you don't like kids and that irritates you, you've got to be able to cope with that, right? I've been in a house recently last week. I've been doing some development for another lady. We're working on anti-inflammatory foods and that sort of thing. The house was chaotic. It took me a lot to be able to focus and concentrate on what I was doing because there were so many staff in and out, house managers in, PAs in, kids. It was just crazy. And then everyone wanted to throw their 2 cents in. And I was like, you know what? You need to back off and you need to let me just do what I do. And then let's sit down and discuss it because it's so distracting.
But do you say that?
In the nicest possible way. I did mention it. I actually mentioned it to the house manager. I said, well, it's a bit chaotic in here. It's very hard for me to, to concentrate. And then they closed doors and, but there was still a lot of chaos happening in the kitchen because that's like the central focal point. And I had to say, right, guys, I really need this space or I need this. And I had to just be a bit firm about how I wanted things. But you have to do it in a way that doesn't, how do I say, put someone's nose out of joint, if that makes sense. But, staff are, it's culturally the way they behave. They're noisy, they're loud. It's their break time. They come in to get food for them to eat, but they don't realize that.
So is this also in a high-profile client's house?
Yeah.
And you were creating a menu for anti-inflammatory foods.
Developing some foods, sugar-free, gluten-free, dairy-free, so no eggs, and creating cakes and muffins. And I actually made a detox truffle that worked really, really well. It was something I wanted to use with activated charcoal. So I was creating this because they have a business where I'm going forward. It's more on a consultation basis of innovation and creation. So it's an initial day to just kind of work with them, get to know what they were like, but also then they could taste as we went along and we could say, right, we like this. No, we're going to change that. So they needed to be there to give me the input because then it's going into production. But
so hold on, what was this for? Now I'm confused. This is not for a private house because, as you said, you've left that now.
It started in a private house because the site's not ready. So you're using the client's home at the moment to, use their kitchen, etc. So
for a business that they're creating.
Yes. So this is more brand development, food development, that sort of thing. So that's another kind of string to my bow. Food development.
Okay.
So that's
why were you on TV the other day? What was that?
Islam TV found me over Ramadan they wanted to find different chefs to cook different cuisines, and they'd asked me to do a couple of recipes over Ramadan, which I did. So it was my first time, recording. And then I got on really well with the producers, and they started a new show the other day, and they'd asked me to be the chef to go on, to initially, there was an amazing panel of, celebrities in their world. And they asked me to go and do something for them as an initial, my first live sort of appearance. So yeah, bit the bullet and did it. It wasn't easy. I think a lot of people don't understand that being on TV and media isn't an easy thing. It's absolutely exhausting being on camera and which camera to look at. And but it was a great experience. And yeah, so I've got a relationship with them there, and I'm in and out of doing bits and pieces for them.
Yeah.
So that's quite exciting.
So tell me, when you go back now to when you started studying and you were interested in food, and like, what did you hope for yourself then?
I don't think I really knew back then. I think when I was a lot younger, I wanted to have like a boutique style cafe, something a bit like Tasha's in South Africa. Absolutely love the brand, because I'm very quirky with my food. But as time has evolved and traveled, I think I've learned so much that having your own restaurant is a lot of work. It's a lot of pressure. And I think that's why I steered with private service, because I can still work at that high level and have amazing experiences and still have training, but I don't have the responsibility of, the massive financial build up the capital to actually own a venue and have it as my own. Whereas I take my services and I, extend that out to clients. So it keeps evolving.
Yeah. And tell me, where are you at with your own personal life, with relationships, kids? Like, do you have any of that? Do you want any of that?
No kids. Yes, I do. I kind of have I've been through a phase where I've wanted kids, but my job hasn't allowed it. Because being in service, a lot of the time you're on the go so much, it doesn't allow you to have that. My relationship has struggled. It's been very, very difficult. Traveling, being in different parts of the world, it takes a lot of strain. So it's constantly, having to remind yourselves, why are we together? Why do we want this to work? And making extra efforts of, yes, I'm busy, but acknowledging a text message or sending a voice message, to let the other person know that, look, this is going on for me. But I'm still acknowledging you, and whether it's 2 a.m, I will make that phone call and I will get back to you. It's not easy. It really isn't. And I think this is the other reason why the pandemic's taught me to change things and say, right, I've missed out so much on family. I've missed out on so many events and Christmases and birthdays and special things that I don't want to do that anymore. So I kind of make work fit around me now. And yes, there are times when it's absolute pressure and I have to be away, but then I'm also making a conscious effort to balance and say, right, what's important to me? What needs to be done? Right, I'm going to work a 3-4 day week, and then I'm taking time off so I can have the weekend with family. I can have time with my partner, etc. It's making conscious efforts to make that happen, which in the past, it was just like, well, this is my life. If you don't accept it, well, it's not going to work. And that's happened in the past, and relationships have fallen apart because, the guys understand that this is what she does and they think, oh my God, amazing. But then when they see the pressure I'm under and, the constant strain, the travel, etc., then they can't handle it. So it takes a special kind of person to be with me, to be fair. And, he has a lot of patience. So I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah. And tell me, where do you normally meet your partners? Is there a pattern there?
Because I travel so much, I tend to meet people when I'm overseas a lot, not really in the UK. Because I'm not really here a lot. I come back home this is the UK, sort of my respite. This is where I come to rest, to repack and refocus and then move again. So when I'm overseas, whether it's the US or the Middle East, and there's so many expats, because I've been an expatriate for probably about 15 years. I've had 2 homes in 2 different countries. I end up meeting people overseas. And it's a very different sort of relationship that you have. So, the people I've dated, say in the Middle East, for example, you know, you're all out there, you come out from whichever country, Europe or whatever it is. But then when you're in these countries and there are a lot of restrictions, there's sometimes the lifestyle's not that amazing, you know, you don't have such a social life or whatever. The one person that you do meet becomes your everything. So it's so intense. But then sometimes that will not work anywhere else. It'll only work there. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. It's a location situation type relationship.
Yeah, that happens. You know, it's a big thing for a lot of chefs. But then there are chefs who have children, who are married, and I know so many of them. But then when they go overseas, they have a playmate, because life is what it is. You know, we all have needs, we humans, and you know, human connection is important. So
yeah,
you know, you do what you have to do to survive and to be able to cope. So you know, it's an interesting world. It's a very different lifestyle, but you can't do it forever. That's for sure.
Yeah. So what is, just on the, you know, on connecting with your love for the food, tell us about the foods that you cook and what you really enjoy cooking and the menus that you're inspired by.
I think at the moment, you know, focusing on all the anti-inflammatory foods, and especially for my own health has kicked that off. I love playing with different flavor profiles. Something I absolutely love, the combination of passion fruit and yuzu, you know, so refreshing. And, you know,
like, how would you present that?
So in two different ways, one in a dessert, actually, having sort of like, I want to say it's almost like a sponge, maybe with like white chocolate, and then having like I want to say almost like a jelly on top of that. So, but it will be a yuzu and passion fruit infused yuzu on top. So it's like a little, I'm trying to think of what you would call it. But as a dessert, it would be something, you know, it's quite indulgent in that way. But then also something simple as, you know, just chocolate desserts and very comfort foods, I think. But twisting up comfort foods and making them a bit more interesting and alive. I love the Arabic cuisine. I think that's become a big strength for me. You know, a really good, you know, shawarma, but I make shawarma sushi, for example. And I've called something a falafel waffle. I call it a falafel, which is basically a falafel waffle. So it's taking something, you know, and then twisting it and giving it an edge, you know, which I think is quite fun. I enjoy using like syringes and pipettes and sort of lab equipment, you know, creating a creme brulee in like a sardine can, things like that, you know, so people, it's all food experience. My signature has become, I have perspex boards, and the black ones work absolutely amazing. The whites are also great depending on the colors you use. And I do deconstructed desserts. So when I do an event or private function, and this could be for special diets, etc., and I just use substitutions for it. And I basically create food art. So, you know, you're sitting around the table with your guests and, you know, you've already had a dessert, but then I come out and they want some interaction with the chef. So you come out and you create something beautiful and you squish, and, you know, one that I do is a deconstructed eaten mess. That's one that I've done loads of times. And you're smashing meringue, but if you can imagine a blackboard and you've got a lovely creme anglaise, you've got like raspberry coulis, and you've got fresh berries and, you know, creme chantilly, and maybe a nice sorbet, like even a strawberry sorbet. And so you've got all the elements, texture, crunch, potentially putting in some of that popping candy, you know, so making things fun. I really enjoy making food fun and interesting.
Yeah.
And using, you know, a lot of the health foods, but also making them more appealing for people to want to eat and say, oh yeah, I do. Everyone knows a falafel, but then how do you change that falafel? You know, and maybe I infuse it with, I love the pipettes, and I'll do a little sauce or a pesto or something and inject it with it. So, you know, when it comes to you, there's something for you to do. People love the food theater and the food art. So that's kind of where I'm at, really. Creation, innovation, and development more than anything right now. You know? So.
And tell me, what about, so one of our really good family friends, she calls me her second daughter. She was my mom's really good friend. She's Portuguese, Linda Coelho, and she's a chef. And but she's one of these chefs that when you walk into the kitchen or she's cooking in your house, your kitchen will never look the same again. I mean, it is just chaos,
Chaos.
okay? But let me tell you, her food is unbelievable. I mean, but she cooks like farm style cooking, right? She's like big pots.
Yep.
You know, it's big pots and it's chaos and it's
Yep.
just it's delectable. Does that kind of cooking not interest you?
There are moments for it. Absolutely. There are absolutely moments for that. I mean, the other day I cooked for some family in London and I made an Indonesian fried chicken biryani. So everyone knows biryani is the rice and you have a layer of the curry, but there's nothing of that. So this is literally, I mean, I literally had all the family in the kitchen and we had glasses of wine and they were watching me cook. And, you know, so when it's close, I would say close family, close friends, I tend to do that. When I'm entertaining for guests or, you know, doing an event, it depends on the client. It totally depends on what they also want to eat. So there are moments when you'll do, you know, I've done Italian style where you're doing arancini, but they want to be involved and they want to sit around. And, you know, I like to have that sort of atmosphere, even with my clients when it's possible, that, you know, they come into the kitchen, they feel free to sit and, you know, have a drink, ask questions, get involved. I love to do that.
Yeah, I think that's, well, from hearing also your story, to me, it sounds like that's more where it's that intimacy. And then obviously through that, you get to see their reaction. And that's how you get your affirmation that you talk about. That's so important to you.
That's it. But it's also, you know, I think I like to see, I'm in service. I have a passion to serve. It's just who I am. If you're in hospitality, it is what it is. You love to serve people, you know, and to see food brings pleasure, right? It's one of the pleasurable things we have in life. So, you know,
absolutely,
taste, flavor, you know, bringing people together. I mean, if I say this, Jen, over the pandemic, I think one of the best things I ever did was bring a family together over a blue jeans call. They were all scattered all over. We did an Italian course. It was a 3-course menu, but can you imagine the grandparents on one location, grandparent, you know, children, parents everywhere. And I brought everyone together in my kitchen, you know, during the pandemic, and we cooked. And then they sat and they ate, and, you know, I'm on the call, but it was like, you know, they're all in their respective houses, but we were all together. And that was one of the nicest things, you know, at the end of it, when everyone felt, oh my God, we didn't know how that was going to be. It brought us together through food, through a call. You know, it's touching people's lives, you know, in very simple ways. And I think for me, that's what it is. With anything I do, I want to touch someone's life. I want to leave them better off than they were before they met me. You know, if I can, if I could have any influence over anyone or help them, that's what I want to do. And I made Ambassador of the Month for the Burnt Chef Project the other day. I had tears in my eyes and I was humbled, absolutely grateful. It came at a really good time because I had a very challenging week. And when my fellow ambassadors had nominated me, I don't know how to say that, you know, the appreciation of what they know that I've been doing for the last couple of months, how hard I've worked, the lives I've touched. You know, people have actually gone back to my director and said, you know, this is what she's done for me. And I don't ask for that, Jen, not at all. But, you know, when it does come back and I get the acknowledgement of, oh my goodness, you've touched so many lives over the last couple of months. For me, that is the best thing I can hear. You know, for me, that's the best present anyone can give me, is that I've made a difference in your life. You know, that I've done something positive, that I've maybe helped you get into a new direction, whether it's food, whether it's your mental health, whether it's just sitting and listening to you. You know, I've had a client who, he was so busy in his mind that he couldn't focus on the task at hand. I had to sit and just talk to him for 2 hours. And at the end of that, he actually just said, thank you so much. I just needed to have that conversation. So for me, it's about touching people's lives. The food element is, I'm known as mama in the kitchen. You know, everyone knows, they come to me, I feed everyone. That's just who I am. But also I think it's the culture, the Portuguese thing. We feed, it's the Mediterranean, you know, side of me where, you know, it's all about food in our homes. You want to know everyone's okay. I'm a nurturer, and that's why the 3 words I use, my plant-based and my culinary medicine, is, you know, to nurture, to nourish, and to bring you back into wholesomeness. You know, I think that's so important. So if I can do that in any aspect, that's my number 1 goal. You know,
Yeah.
that's where I am.
Yeah. So what is your, where are you now? Like, where are you going? So on a daily basis, do you have a sort of routine now or on a weekly basis, a monthly basis? Like, what's your, how do you label what you do now?
So it's been very difficult because of COVID. At the moment, I've been doing a lot of freelance work, going into different places, supporting head chefs, supporting teams. I've been doing development with a couple of different people, so helping them develop, you know, foods for their companies. So I try and range things and keep things different. Then I've got, you know, I'll do a couple of private parties, dinners. This weekend coming up, I gifted one of my best friends for their birthday a 3-course dinner of their choice. So I'll be traveling down to London to go and cook for them, but they're very good friends, and you know, it's something that I want to do. So I make time for different things, but I'm also in the process of really focusing on honing in the wellness side of everything, setting up more clinics, helping people more with detox and toxicology, and the plant-based nutritional side. Not just plant-based, I think, you know, focusing on different diets depending on what the client is, but more flexitarian, of having more fish and chicken and more vegetables and increasing that, helping people through different conditions, working with other nutritionists, doctors, personal trainers, that sort of thing. That's really more my goal. I also have a couple of things I'm looking at back in the Middle East again. So very high level positions where it'll be, you know, running teams, mentoring, managing, teaching, training. So that's sort of my goal going
And
forward.
for what? For the teams for a private house again,
For private
or for
houses, resorts, that kind of thing. Yeah. So going in to do, also creating the plant-based menus, vegetarian menus. A lot of people and chefs get daunted by this. So it's going in to create, menu develop, training the staff to be at a level that they need to be at, because to be fair, the Middle East is changing, it's evolving so quickly.
Yeah.
But they do need the training, and they need the education and to be kept up to speed. So that's sort of a goal with everything I do now, and having, you know, the Burn Chef project at the back of my mind, where it's, you know, educating people to create a better workplace culture, not just in hospitality, but in absolutely everything, the office environment, you know, looking after people's well-being. So that's a big part of, you know, I can see myself doing a lot more charity work with the project. I've had somebody in the US reach out, and they want me to go out and talk and speak about it and create a network in the US to expand that. So that's definitely something, you know, I'm looking into.
And the Burn Chef project is, I mean, that's, as you said, charity work. You don't get paid, or do you get
No, it's something we do at the moment. I think eventually it will be, but because it's still so new, and we do this because we love what we do.
Yeah.
And we want to help people, and we want to let people know that there's a better way of doing things and creating better environments wherever we go. The lives that we touch, whether we're recruiting, whether we're working with them in the kitchen, whether it's an HR manager or a GM of a company, you know, it's just exposing and educating as well as we go along. So this is something I'm very passionate about. And I take that into my life every single day with everything I do.
So who started the Burn Chef project?
Chris Hall. His name is Chris Hall. And he started the Burn Chef project. It's kind of when the pandemic kicked off, I think. It's been a year and a bit now. But it's growing from strength to strength. We have representatives in South Africa, I believe. I think we've got some in the US as well, in Canada, Ireland, and here in the UK. So we are growing. There is a a Facebook page as well to be able to reach out, where we it's the Burnt Chef Worldwide, and reaching out and saying, also there's every day we have different things, so it's information, it might be a quote, it might be some training, some education, just letting people know that there's help out there, and there is something, there's a lot of us that are willing to make changes and help. There's also a texting service, so it's 24/7. If someone's struggling, there's a within, I think it's 2 minutes, you'll have someone talking to you. So this is something that we is pushed out throughout. Chris goes around to talk. He does a lot of the training. He trains the leaders and managers in a lot of sites, be it restaurants, pubs, that kind of thing.
And
So,
is this because there have been a few suicide stories, or a few just burnt out stories, or what is it?
I think it's a combination of the industry is definitely struggling with staff. Since the pandemic, we've lost so many people, but also there's still so much suicide, Jen. There's a lot of suicide, there's a lot of drug abuse, there's a lot of mental health problems in hospitality. So what this is trying to do is eradicate the mental health stigma we have, and saying it's okay to not be okay, and to say, right, there is help if you need someone to speak to, if out of something, whether it's an addiction, it's putting people in touch with the right professionals to help them be able to overcome that. But also, conditions have become so stagnant, especially in the UK. Things are, it's very difficult for me as a private chef to go into a restaurant and a pub here, or, I'm not that kind of a chef. I'm definitely elevated, and I've outgrown all of that, So when I go into, some chefs don't know any better. That's all they know. They know, oh, right, I've got to work a 15-hour day. I don't eat, or I sit on a stock pot and I have my dinner, and to them, that's just the norm, because it has been like that for generations. So we coming in and saying, no, the rota needs to be sorted out. You need to give people breaks, so they're not just doing 15 hours straight. You've got to stop, have a break. It's also, when you're in those stressful situations, it offers coping mechanisms of, it's the whole thing of the touch, feel, see, the whole 5 senses thing of, when you're feeling like your head's like spaghetti and you can't focus, it's like, right, okay, breathe. There's some breathing techniques to help bring the fight and flight mode, because chefs are in fight and flight mode a lot of the time. So breathing, just to refocus and be like, okay, where am I? What can I see? What can I feel? What can I taste? What can I, just to bring yourself back. So it's incorporating all of that into, your daily routine, and saying, how to cope better, how to have better relationships, leadership skills, all that kind of thing. So, it's going to take a while, obviously it's going to take ages, but it is growing, and the movement is very, very popular here. Yes, do we get opposition? There are a lot of nasty people, regardless of what you're trying to do. There's always someone trying to bring you down, right? I think
like
that's life. People are, we've had a lot of nasty comments come in. I think people just don't understand. When they don't understand and they're not educated enough, they want to break things down. So no matter what you do, whether it's the project, whether it's a job and you're a chef, I've had it where I've posted something on a group on Facebook. It's a chef group, and I'm trying to help or recruit. And you won't believe, the kind of people that come back, and the kind of things they'll say. There'll be racial comments, there'll be, oh, is this a Mickey Mouse outfit? They will just try and break you and slate you completely, and there's just a lot of that still going around. So it's going to take a long time, because a lot of guys are like, oh, they're just macho, they just deal with it, or, oh yeah, I'm tattoos and a bald head and I can't talk about that and it's not spoken about. I'm like, no, well, actually you can. You can speak about what's going on, because if you carry on, you're just deteriorating. You're not getting any better. So
why is this so important to you?
I think because I've been through it, Jen. I've suffered with depression. I actually, I have a CBT therapist that I'm working with. So I've struggled with.
What does that stand for? CBT?
Cognitive behavioral therapy.
Oh, yeah.
So, I've struggled through the pandemic, pre-pandemic, in my industry, being broken down, just different things. I also, my father was killed in Africa, 14 years ago. It was a very tragic thing. And then one of my brothers put a gun to his head a few years later. So I've had a lot of trauma. I've had a lot of things to cope with. So for me, I never had any help. Everyone's like, oh, see a shrink, but it wasn't the right thing. So, I guess you suppress emotions, you suppress, and then you have triggers. And I've had so many triggers and so much anger. And I've just been blessed, really, really blessed this last year, where I've met some incredible people who've worked with me, from intuitive healers to, meditation, life coaches. I've just had amazing people over the last year and a half come alongside me who I've met through, maybe it's a call or a podcast or something. Someone reaches out and say, hey, I'd love to work with you, or, can we do this together? And, I'm constantly learning, and they help me realize and say, hey, you need to let go of that. I mean, I was gifted a course through a very good friend, and it was all about unstick your unstuckness. So you stuck and where you want to go, but you're feeling stuck. Why are you feeling stuck? What are those triggers? What is making you stay there? And obviously, I've had a lot of trauma. I've been through a lot of really painful situations, losing your father, especially, not being able to say goodbye. It's different when you lose someone and they're ill and you have those moments to say goodbye. It's different when they're just taken away from you, So that played a really big part in, my personality and how I changed, the depression I suffered, the mental health, my mental health was terrible. Absolutely. I really, really struggled for years. So
Well,
it all
paint
kind of
paint
came
that picture for
together.
us. Paint, what does mental struggle look like for you on a daily basis, like in a day? What does that look like?
So for me, if I give you like my worst days, it would be, you have the feeling of there's anxiety, there is a deep depression, a sadness, a loneliness, a feeling of not being able to reach out, not being able to get out of bed. You don't want to eat, you don't want to speak to people, you completely recluse. And for me, I'm introverted that way, where I love people, but I also need to step away. But when I'm in those moments and I can't, I need to, how do I say, I take a step back, and it's sort of, sometimes I can't control it. I just have to process that moment. If I can't get out of bed, then that's what it is. Then I'll cry and I'll be in bed all day, or, until I can feel I can do the next thing. The depression kicks in where you feel hopeless. People can say to you, oh my goodness, you've accomplished so much, you've done so much. But, I've had a struggle even with that, even with those little things this last week, where people are like, oh my God, you're an amazing human being, and thank you so much for everything you've done. But I don't see that, if that makes sense. Other people see, but I don't see that in me. So, and I think that also comes from, my confidence being broken in the past, people breaking me down, telling me I'd never amount to anything, I'd never be anything,
Is
I'd
this
never
people in the
achieve that.
industry? People in the industry.
Industry and family.
Which family? Why would family do that?
My family is extremely dysfunctional, Jen. When my dad died, I learned a lot about people, and I've cut out everybody. I've cut everyone out. I've chosen who my family are now. And family for me is not blood. Family is who's there for you, in those tough moments, who stands by you. So I have chosen who my family are to me today. So it's been a very difficult time where you've had, with the struggle, it's, everyone has family or relatives or whatever, but the backbone of my father was my backbone. He was my strength. So when he was taken away, there was a lot of things happened, propelled from that. So now I have myself, and it's, relying on me to be able to do things. But then where the projects come in and help me is that, I've met other people who are struggling, who've also been through things, but they don't judge me, and it's a safe space. Hence why the CBT therapy helping me overcome, certain behaviors. And then, like, just this last week, I mean, I had a breakdown. I had a pretty stressful week. I had a lot of emotional things to deal with, and I struggled, but I knew I had someone safe in my ambassador group that I could call, and I picked up the phone and he was there for me and we spoke and we talked it through and I felt better. And it's the support I've never had before. It's the safe space of not being judged of, oh, she's just crazy. Oh, she needs to be on medication. Or no, it's actually understanding, what has this woman gone through? Why is she behaving the way she is? You know, and having a safe space, which I never, ever had before. So for me, this project it's become a family. It's become, you know, a support where, you know, where my director can call me and say, you know what, I'm here. If you need me, I'm here. And you know what, just something so simple as that, Jen, makes the world of a difference. But I have hundreds of people in my phone, but I can't always pick up the phone and call. Or I don't know if that makes sense to you, but
totally.
you know, I would rather call someone I don't know or someone that doesn't know everything about me. And that's why, you know, with the ambassadors, some of us haven't really been able to meet yet because of the pandemic, but we have a group, we have support where if you're struggling, you write on there, someone will get back to you, someone will call you, you'll talk it through, you'll have support to know that you're not crazy, you're going to get through this. If there's anything they can do for you, they're there. And for me, that is gold, you know. That is.
So tell me, you talk about having an emotional week. I mean, because we're talking about mental health and the support of that, like, why do you have such an emotional week that it causes almost trauma in your week? Like, what sets it off?
I think it's a build-up of a combination of things. There were a couple of disappointments. There was some work, some clients, and there were some things I was really looking forward to getting, and they didn't work out. And it's life, right? It's life. We all get disappointed. You don't always get everything you want. There were a couple of things to do with family. There was a couple of things to do with a relationship. And, you know, where I think I'm overtired. I've been on pretty much close to burnout, you know, working and trying to build a business, build a new brand, you know, doing so many different things where, you know, my team said to me the other day, they were just like, you need to stop. You care about everybody else, but you need to start taking care of you. Take a few days off for yourself because it gets overwhelming. And then not knowing where to reach out, how to reach out. And then it was also the struggle of trying to get the consistency, you know, with building in your business, it's very hard, isn't it? So you don't always have the consistency straight away. It takes time. So I've had a couple of hurdles to overcome. And I think it just got so overwhelming for me that I hit a point where, it was breakdown, you know, I had to just break. And sometimes it's not a bad thing to cry, right? It's not, you're releasing those emotions and being able to speak about them and say, and then having someone, you know, in my safe space say to me, well, that's okay. If you lost your temper, that's okay. You're allowed to do that. You know, this pushed you to that. And there were a couple of triggers. So, but it's also knowing what the triggers are, you know, and learning from that and saying, actually, you know what, that actually wasn't so bad, but it was made worse because I'm tired, I'm overworked, I'm trying to figure things out. So that situation felt a hell of a lot worse because of, you know, the other factors behind it. So,
and tell me, how did so with your dad leaving, because you say he was killed, and then your brother took his own life, how did that, and these are two different exits, that your dad suddenly being killed is something like, okay, that was like that's out of his control. That was a universal thing that came out of, you know, it wasn't a decision. With your brother, he you know, and obviously suicide is such a deep conversation, but there were two different types of deaths, and the one was, well, as we've just described. So how did that play in your perception of life and existence, and how is that affecting you now?
you know, it's still, I'm a lot better than where I was, Jen. I think I was suicidal at one point. I didn't want to live. I had lost all hope. It was super challenging, you know, when my father died. It was, you can only imagine it's something you'd see in a movie potentially, you know, the dysfunction, my father had two different wives, so I had siblings from, you know, the step, etc. So you can imagine, you know, when you haven't really had a great relationship with them your whole life, and then, you know, the rock of the family disappears, you can imagine the chaos that comes with that. So I had a lot of things, a lot of pressure, a lot of situations that I think most people would never go through. You know, I was in Europe when it happened. I hadn't seen my father for about a year, I think it was. And, you know, when I got the phone call, it was beyond it, you know, it was no, like, this isn't happening. You know, the process of how can this be happening? It's not real. And then having to fly out to Africa, and you've got all these people in your house, you've got to deal with, you know, everyone trying to tell you what to do and how to, I guess, how they want you to cope. I lost it. I completely went AWOL. I was a complete nightmare. Anyone trying to be close to me or near me for, I think it was about 4 years. It was very, very difficult. I was in and out of trying to see therapists. They never worked. I was drinking and, you know, trying to find something just to numb that pain, to cope and, you know, get through it. And I went through a period where I didn't want to live anymore. I questioned life, and I'm like, why am I here? Why am I living? What, you know, what is my purpose? What is it for me to do on this earth? You know? And then my brother and I
and what answers were coming to you then? So when you were asking those questions, what was coming to you?
There was a lot of, initially it didn't come, you know, as easily as I wanted it to. And there were 2 or 3 people in my life that spent hours and hours and hours speaking to me and trying to show me things that I couldn't see and the value that I had in other people's lives. And I think that was what sort of helped. But then I think I also had a job opportunity that took me away from absolutely everything and where I was. And I needed that change of scenery. I needed the change to go and just be myself somewhere where no one knew me. And I could just get on with something and focus. And that's what I ended up doing. So I know it sounds like you're running away, but for me, it's like I needed to leave everything and everyone I knew to be able to just get away and process on my own. And it's been a long journey. It's been a really, really long journey. But there are days, you know, when things go horribly wrong, and, you know, the pandemic hasn't made things easy for us recently. So, you know, you do question, you like, why am I here? Why is life so hard? You know, how do I cope with this? How do I, you know, then move forward? But what I've learned is to create a safe space. I've created a network of support, to be able to get that when I need it, if that makes sense. You know, instead of having a family that you can turn to and say, right, I'm struggling with this, because family just made it worse, Jen, for me. You know, a lot of them just triggered me more than actually helping me. So I had to just cut everyone out. And I had to get inside my head. And then I also he's a very good friend, but he was also a life coach, over some of that time, where he talked with me, he processed, he helped me think about things, he helped me look at things in different light. And yeah, I mean, at the time it was very difficult, but, you know, over time and doing that work has really helped. So I think it's really helpful to have someone that you can trust, that you can talk to, and that you know the advice is sound and it's for you. You know, I think that's been a very important part for me in my recovery process. But then also therapists have always had this, oh, if you see a therapist, you're not, you know, there's something wrong with you. And I'm like, well, clearly I come from a dysfunctional background, you know, so if then something like this happens, it's a major trauma. And people just try and cover it up. And I was like, no, but now, you know, I've actually sought therapy. I've reached out for help to cope and say, right, I don't want to be miserable anymore. I don't want to be feeling like that anymore. And I want to move on with my life. So what are my choices? And I think that's why this project also means so much to me, because it gives me a sense of belonging somewhere. It gives me a sense of purpose, and knowing that if I speak my truth and my story, there might be someone else out there saying, hey, you know what? I've had a parent or a family member that's been murdered or killed, or, you know, I've struggled with someone in my family who's had suicide. I'm not scared to speak about it, because if it helps somebody else, for me, it's healing. Talking about it is healing. But also saying, hey, you know what? If this person is brave enough to expose themselves that way, I hope that can help somebody else be brave in their life. You know, I think that's where it's saying, hey, you know, if you can turn this negative into a positive, how can you do that?
And your brother's leaving, how did that impact you? Was it the same as your dad, or different?
It was different. it was different, still painful, but different, if that makes sense. It was a shock. I think we kind of knew something wasn't right. We knew there was depression, but yet again, you know, you're in Africa, there weren't so many, you know, it's not the sort of done thing, isn't it? And also culturally, I think it's the sort of thing where, oh, I'm a man, I'll just cope with it. And he used to drink a lot. So, you know, he became an alcoholic, and I think things just got to him. And I think he eventually found out and heard some information that, you know, potentially about my father, that spun him on the edge and just said, I can't do this anymore. So, I mean, he literally walked into a room. I think my nephew and my sister-in-law were lying down, and he took his gun. He had a bottle of whiskey in his hand, and he just, that was it.
In front of them.
In front of them.
Wow.
So the trauma, going through that and understanding that someone's got to that point in their life, you know, that they can't handle it. They've had no support. They've had no one to turn to be real with, to speak their truth. You know, for me, it's like, no, that's not going to happen again. You know, like if I can help that, that's not going to happen again. So it's been a long journey, Jen, and it's come, I would say over the last 2 years, a lot of things have really come to light for me. I wasn't as awake, should I say, spiritually or mentally. I wasn't, you know, there were so many dogmas, there were so many things, you know, that you grow up with, and those are the beliefs that you were set with, that I've had to unlearn so much to be able to move forward, you know.
Yeah.
So the pain is there, you know, you never forget it, but I think I would say with time it just gets easier, you know.
Yeah.
You just know that you hope they're in a better place, and you're like, well, if we can avoid that happening again, how do we do that? Because you can only imagine what's going on in their brain, right? You can only imagine for them to get to that point, something is really, you know, there's something very painful behind that. So yeah, it's, you know, I think that's why being an inspiration to somebody else, being able to help somebody else, I think that's why that's become so important to me. And then when you see suicide in our industry as well, you know, like just the other day, someone was saying they walked over a bridge where someone had clearly tried to take their life. And you just wonder, like, what is going through? There's so many lonely people out there today. There's so many people struggling with different things, you know, that we just need to be kind. We need to be more understanding, you know, and it doesn't cost anything to be kind or just say, hey, how are you? But ask that twice. And that's something we train to do. Is like, you can ask someone how they are. Most people, oh, I'm fine. But ask again, how are you really? What is really going on with you? You know? And I think education is power. I mean, you know, I didn't know as much as I know now. In the last 2 years, I've learned so much. And I think if there were things and coping mechanisms I knew that could have helped my brother back in the day, then, you know, that might have saved his life, really.
Yeah.
You know, if he'd had the same sort of support.
Yeah, although it's also tricky when there's any drugs or alcohol involved, because then, do you know what I mean? That then you're dealing with a whole nother level of coping and dealing with it. Yeah. Wow. So I mean, so now what I'm hearing is you wanting to go, you already are in the more holistic journey, but you are still doing these, you know, the ad hoc private catering job. Yeah, I mean, where, you know, what makes you proud to look forward to?
I think, you know, it's something I've asked myself this week. It's like, well, where am I at now? What have I done? What haven't I done? So where can I go now? And I'm like, right, I still love people. I love helping people. I have a compassion for humanity. So yes, do I love, you know, the ultra high net worth world? Yes, I love being a bit of a princess sometimes, you know. So yes, I do want to stay in touch with that side of the world, but equally I'm in a transition process. So it's not going to happen, you know, it's going to take time to transition. And also the career I'm creating for myself is not there yet. It's still, you know, it's something I'm creating and creating a space for me to be able to do that. So I still have to do what I have to do to pay the bills and to survive, and, you know, like everybody else. But the ultimate goal is my ideal work life would be to work 4 days a week, being able to travel around the world globally, set up global retreats for corporates, for families, for couples, for singles, and, you know, helping people overcome, you know, trauma, you know, food, by bringing in those experts as well, you know, with those expertise to help, where I say, right, I'm going to help with the food, and we're going to nourish your body, and we're going to nurture you. But then we're going to have, you know, maybe a hypnotherapist or an intuitive healer or someone else to work alongside to say, right, on this new journey, you know, to help you get to where you need to be, this is what we're going to do. We are going to be your support and guide to get you to the next level, to help create like a kindness effect, like pay it forward, really, of, you know, this is what we're doing for you, and then the next person, and hopefully you'll do that for the next person. So that's kind of how I see things going forward. You know, educating, recruiting, mentoring. I have quite a few, you know, some of the young, especially kids in hospitality, I've become a mentor to, and I look after, and I really enjoy that. So I think, you know, setting up workshops, being an inspiration, you know, if I can help them navigate life a bit easier than it was for me, then that's something I see myself, you know, really doing going forward.
Yeah. And one thing, and we're going to lead towards closing off soon, but, you know, so we scheduled this interview for 9 o'clock South African time, 8 o'clock
Yeah.
UK time.
Yes.
But both of us didn't put into our calendars that it was the clock change.
Clock change,
So then
yeah.
it changed to 2 hours difference. So obviously I messaged you and said, everything okay? They're waiting for you to dial in.
Yeah.
And you said, yeah, all cool. Well, you're like, yeah, cool. I'm just waking up. And I was
Just
like, no, well, the interview starts now.
yeah,
So,
I know. I was like, all right, just gotta get up.
but you without any hesitation or resistance or need to flight, you know, you're like, cool, I'll dial in now, I'll be there now. You know, I can imagine this high intensity that you've been exposed to can really catapult you in your journey going forward, because I feel like that tornado is over in a way. That's how it feels in hearing your
Yeah.
story. But it definitely has given you an edge of like, yeah, sure, I'll be there now, you know, put on my beanie and I'm here, you know, put in a nice jumper and don't sweat the small stuff and try and make up an excuse, which you have. I have that with people. It's like, okay, can we maybe reschedule? Can we do it in an hour? Or, you know, and I'm like, these pressurized situations are also good for us to an extent.
Yeah. But I think what I loved about your show, Jen, is that we just come on as who we are, right? No makeup, no, it's for me, it's like, I am who I am. You know, you see my branding, you see everything else, you know, that's who I am in that environment, but this is me. This is the real me. And I think with what I've listened to with a lot of podcasts that you know, with the guests you've had, you know, so many of those have touched me, you know, just listening to people, but it's the raw content of, it's just them, you know, and there's no judgment. There's no, you know, there's no like, oh, there's a certain way that you have to behave. Yes, we know there's an etiquette now because of COVID. It's brought us into this, you know, everything's digital and etc. But I'm like, well, if I'm going to speak to you about me, I'm just going to be me. So I'm at home. Yeah, I'm just in a jumper. I woke up, literally jumped on with you. But this was important because I was like, this is an opportunity, you know, and who knows whose life it'll touch or inspire somebody, or, you know, maybe someone will say, hey, I want to work with her, or I want to get involved, you know, and that's what this is about. So I think that's the important thing. It's not, you know, the materialistic side of being a certain way and, you know, having a filter. And, you know, I just think being raw and real with people, we need more of that, you know, because this world is so, you've got filters for everything, you know, and everyone wants to look a certain way, but sometimes just be you, you know, let people see who you really are. And I think for me, a code of conduct for me is transparency is one thing, you know, loyalty. And I'm somebody who, if I say I'm going to do something, I do it, you know, and I think those are my code of ethics, and it served me well. And wherever I go, people know they can trust me. They know I'm reliable. And that's something that I hold big for me and my brand, you know, to say if you're associated with me, this is what will happen. Things do happen. And yes, you know, there might be a situation where something happens, you're like, oh, Jen, it's not possible, this has happened, but it's a genuine thing, and you communicate. Communication is also important to say, this has happened. Like I'd text you, example, this morning, oh, I'm just waking up, the alarm's just gone off, this is what's going on. You communicate, so you understand, oh, this is, you know, you're not leaving people, you know, in a space where they're like, what is going on? Have they, you know, faltered? Is something, you know, maybe they've got scared, or, you know, I think communication is a big part. Communicate with people, be honest, and people will be more understanding to certain things.
Yeah.
I think that's,
Yeah.
you know, in general.
Yeah. Although, I mean, anyway, yeah. But in our case this morning, it it was just pure,
Technical.
I don't know, ignorance. We didn't realize the clock was
No.
changing.
Both of us, to be fair.
So,
All good.
I mean, you know, and I think in closing off now, I mean, what I really like is, you know, in hearing your story is really this, you know, this intensity of the journey that you were on, right?
Yeah.
It felt intense. I felt it in your energy. I could see it. You know, it was an intense part of your life where you got so much out of it. But you're now on a different space. The energy's different. You know, the feng shui, I feel it. You're in a different space now.
Yeah.
What can we leave people with, you know, just in terms of like also acknowledging and being grateful for that crazy,
Absolutely.
you know,
You
life?
know, yes, life has been hard. It hasn't been easy. The last 15 years of my life have been very, very difficult for me. But would I change it? If I look back now, no. If I just tell you that, you know, when I lost absolutely everything in a pandemic and didn't know what I was doing, a year later I'm on TV, a year later I'm talking to you, and I'm building a new brand. So I would say, don't give up. Process your emotions, process where you at. Yes, this is hard. Okay, this has happened. I've lost my job, or this has happened, or some, you know, the death's happened, or whatever it is. I think take time to process that, refocus. I have a vision board. I work on a manifesting bubble. So these are things I've been taught. And having a vision board, writing things down. Where do you want to go? Write that down. If you can't speak to somebody, journal it, you know, because it's nice to reread that, date it. And then you'll go back and be like, oh my goodness, that's where I was. And, you know, you look at it like a couple of weeks down the line and you see where you are. So I find vision boards very powerful. I find sitting in a meditation as well sometimes, where, you know, I just close my eyes and do a bit of breathing and I visualize, what do I want for my life? Where do I want to go? What is it that I want to attract back into my life? The kind of people, the network that will help me get to where I need to be, you know? It's not always easy. And that's why I say, find yourself, create a support group for yourself. Even if it's 1 or 2 people, it could be a helpline, it could be anything that helps you, because speaking about it really does help the healing process, you know, and helps you move through. So I would say having a strong support network is key. You know, being able to have time with yourself and process who you are. What is it that you want? Who is it that you are? And what is it that you have to offer the world? And then write it down and be like, right, this is where I'm at. Where do I want to be a week from now? And don't work so far ahead sometimes. If it's easier to say, right, I'm going to work day by day or week by week. What can I cope with today? Sometimes, you know, when the days are really hard, like for me, when I can't get out of bed some days, it's like, right, what can I do from hour to hour, right? And you cope with that, and you take the small steps, and eventually it gets easier and easier. But I would say, don't give up. Life will beat us down, you know, but don't stay there. Get up, fight it, move forward. And I think that's where I have drive and passion to succeed and say, right, there's certain people, maybe there's somebody listening where, you know, your families have also been from dysfunction or haven't been as educated. Where can you be? How those people in your network, in your family, to be better? You know, educate yourself, get a better job, be inspiring. Whether it's a charity, something, get involved with things that mean something to you. You know, find that purpose and be happy. Make sure that whatever you do, you're happy doing that. Don't just do a job because it's a job. Do it because you love it. you enjoy it. You enjoy waking up to go and do that every day. Finding that is key as well.
Finding it, exactly, if you
Yeah.
don't have it. And just two things in this, because you've mentioned it a few times. You mentioned it now also in our closing, just in terms of the dysfunction, and you don't have to go in too much depth of it, but just let's face it, often people who do try and take their own life or are going through depression, there's always a story of the past. It's
Yeah.
never about now. It's something from the past. And
Absolutely.
often it's the past, right? So
Yeah.
just, I mean, can you enlighten us in terms of what does dysfunction mean to you, just so people can put into perspective?
So dysfunction for me is coming from a home that was broken, that was very, in some ways, abusive. But you don't know any better when you're in that environment. It's, you know, there's no real support. It's being broken down, the confidence. So abuse in different ways, not being educated to be able to make better choices. So you treat your family in different ways. It's also, for me, it was being split between two different homes as a kid. It was, you know, seeing my parents married and divorced twice and then split up, and, you know, different partners moving on, where I couldn't get on with it, where how they treated me, how I was then treated. There was no real support in that. They don't see it, but they don't see it as dysfunction. They just see it as something that's what's there. But something I've learned from, I was actually speaking to a couple of my cousins the other day, and we've all got the same problem. We've noticed that we have the same recurring problem within the family. So there is, you know, the broken homes, the education part, you know, of where the mothers or maybe the fathers were more domineering. There was abuse at home, you know, domestic abuse, all that kind of thing. So when you see that and you grow up with it, it's, you know, there's something that triggers you, you know, triggers. There's going to be anger, there's going to be hate, there's going to be, you know, why is this happening to me? Why can't I just have, you know, a mum and dad, a solid, you know, family where there's trust, where there's, you know, a place of safeness or feeling safe. That's the other thing. I grew up in some, you know, in some of the situations I had growing up, I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel I could speak to anyone in that environment. So for me, that was complete. For me, that's dysfunction, you know, that they don't function like how I see. And that, what is an ideal family, right? I don't know. But you see things on TV, you're like, oh, this is what happens. Or people get together on holidays. And, you know, with my family, there was always an argument. There was a fight. There was, you know, there's chaos. It's complete chaos. So when you grow up in that chaos, you know, it has an effect on you, you know. It has an effect on your personality, on how you behave, on how you handle people. So I'm trying to unlearn a lot of things that were put into me. And that's why when I came to Europe, I cut away from everything South African, because I needed to try and find who I was as a human being. I want to call it like, it's almost like your self-identity of who am I? You know, this is what people say I am because I grew up there. This is what my blood says because that's ethnically who I am. But who am I as a person? Because all those outside influences have that. It's like, oh, because my parents are divorced, is that going to happen to me? There's been domestic violence, is that going to happen to me? Right? So you don't know, and you have to kind of, you figure it out as you go along. That's kind of happened to me. So there was a lot of that for me growing up. I never had, you know, I've had parents, but it's never always been, you know, there's not a lot of memories I have of it being a happy home. You know, when you see your parents fight, etc. It's just, so that's played a very big part on a lot of things for me.
Yeah.
You know, not having
And
the support and safeness.
Yeah. You don't talk about your mom at all.
My mum's here. My mum and I struggle. We have a very difficult relationship. It's been very hard. It's one of those things where I've tried to learn to, it's almost, she's my mother, I love her, but she doesn't understand me. So the conflict comes when I feel there's role reversal. sometimes I feel I'm the adult, you know, in the relationship, and it is a struggle, where I find that if I'm away or in a foreign country, we have a better relationship. We can talk, we can have a laugh, but we can't spend a lot of time together without it being continual. There'll be an argument, it's just chaos. It's complete, you know, we won't agree on things. We have different viewpoints. You know, she has a controlling factor about her. So, and I can't handle that. I'm like, I'm a grown woman. You can't control, you know, things in my life anymore. So that's been very, very difficult for me. And I'm working through things in therapy, and, you know, I'm learning to have boundaries, because we never had boundaries. My mom doesn't know boundaries. So this is something I've had to create. I went through a period of, I think it was about 3 months, where I just didn't talk to her. And I said, please, can you get help so that we can, you know, try and fix this? And she threw it at me, and she doesn't think that, you know, therapy is helpful, because that hasn't worked for her, and that I'm always the problem. So when you've got that, it's very difficult. You know, you should either have a parent to rely on. And I've always felt like I'm on my own, you know, and I've had to fight my own corner. Whatever I do, my success, my failures, I deal with it on my own. You know, if it's beans on toast, it's beans on toast. I don't reach out. I know who I can reach out to for help, and I know who I can't. So it's been a very, very turbulent relationship for us. I don't know if that will ever change, because there are, you know, traits that go back way too long. There's mindsets, and I think sometimes with age, it gets worse than, you know, then it gets better. So I've learned to protect myself and say, this is my space. You're not allowed in it at this point. I'm busy. I'm not picking up the phone. I'm not dealing with it. And I've had to be quite, you know, quite strong about that. So it's not an easy thing. Do I wish for things to change? Yes, I do. But I'm also very, very stubborn. I'm also, you know, my own person, and I'm a very strong-willed character. So if you can't respect and see me for that, then, you know, we're not always going to see eye to eye, and that's normal with everybody, right? In any relationship, you don't always see eye to eye, but there has to be some form of, I don't know, it's almost like you see that the parent is the parent and the child is the child, right? But that hasn't happened. And this is something in the family. This is part of the dysfunction, where a lot of us, you know, as kids have spoken and said, our mothers are all the same. You know, we struggle with that because, you know, we are the strength, and we feel drained because of the energy that we have to then cope with and deal with in the family. So, you know, it's a very difficult thing. And I think that's why I end up, you know, it's almost like running away. I just go far away because I feel more at peace, you know.
But what's funny is you go far away and into these high profile, also almost dysfunctional homes.
Yep. So it's like you run from one thing to another, right? It's a different stress. So I think, you know, this last year is really, I'm just grateful for the support groups and the close knit friends that I have now. I'm so grateful for that, because without them, I don't know how I would move forward. You know, it's having that encouragement. I mean, my sister is amazing. She's, you know, we're very close, and she is the utmost, my little rock star in the side corner. You know, she's my manager when I'm on TV, when I go do TV gigs, you know, she's there. And I think, you know, having that, and, you know, just someone to say in my family, you know, my mother does say it. It's not that she doesn't, you know, that she is proud, etc. But there's just something, you know, when there's something wrong and you can't quite put your finger on it, right? You just know that sometimes you just need somebody else that you know is reliable, that you know is always there. And that's the thing that, you know, with my family, they've never been reliable.
Yeah.
You don't know, they're going to let you down on the last minute. Yeah. So I think that's why, for me, it's such an important thing that people know I'm reliable. They know I'm loyal. They know I'm there. And, you know, it's a safe space with me. And that's what I've tried to create for myself, because I haven't had it. So, yeah. It's
well, I think, yeah, well, you know what, it is, but it's life. It's a life journey. And, and I think that this is the thing, right, is that everyone has life to to travel, and it's all about understanding. And I think that this is really, just such a strong message also in just connect with, with the support groups that you can, but
Absolutely.
also just being aware of how to cope with life, right? Because it's life. Everyone does travel a different journey in life, but we all need coping avenues that we can reach into, grab onto, and also that we can get within ourselves. But and I think also, just your journey of the chef world, and how you're transitioning now more into the holistic avenue of that. It's a beautiful life story. You charged forward, you went for it. You dived in, and
I think people don't always see. I think this is something I've noticed a lot in the last week. A lot of people are like, oh my goodness, they look at my social media and they're like, oh my, you moving forward, you're doing so much. I'm like, yeah, but I'm doing it. I'm not just sitting at home. Do I have my days? Yes. Like everybody else, I have my days when I'm depressed or I cry or I'm upset. I have those, and I'm not scared to admit that. But that's part of life. I have disappointments. I've had a lot of that over the last week. Like I said, I had a bit of a breakdown because I was just like, how much more can one person get thrown with? And, but I'm constantly moving forward. So today I might be crawling, but tomorrow I'm still walking, but I'm still moving. I don't get stuck in it. I don't, there might be a day where I feel, yes, okay, this has really hit me today and I can't do anything else. So I'm just going to do me today, whether it's being on the couch, whether it's eating, whether it's just sleeping. You do what you have to do to cope in that moment, but then you pick yourself up. And I'm a self-motivator. So I take that time to say, right, okay, I've needed that downtime, but now I'm ready to go. What is the next thing? And I'm constantly driven. And I think something one of my really good friends said to me, he says, your tenacity is so admirable. He said, your drive is something we've never seen in anybody else. And I don't know, Jen, if that's because, I've come from a family of where it's at, where a lot of people aren't driven. They've just settled and, I lost my dad. So what can he sacrificed a lot to send me to these schools, etc. So how can I then make him proud where he is? That's another thing for me. It's like, when I'm on TV and I'm airing in 36 different countries, I'm like, oh my God, I wish he was here to see this. I wish he was, next to me. So for me, I'm constantly striving for that. It's not approval, but it's like, I want to do better. I want to do better. I want to do better. Right. I just have that in me. And I can't settle for anything. I just won't settle just because that's what it is. I'm like, no, well, I might have to do this for now, but that's where I want to go. So if I have to sometimes you have to do all the shitty little jobs to get the one that you really want, to be appreciated. But along that way, you still learn, I mean, there's been 1 or 2 sites I've hated, but out of that, I've got 3 people that will message me that absolutely love and respect and admire and look up to me. And I'm like, wow, well, I did something right there, right? So you meet people along the way, and that encouragement helps you to keep going.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And also just, not being afraid of the hard work. I think that that's also really important to to echo out is, especially, for our younger listeners, hard work is important. It is important. You don't just go with the flow in life all the time. You've got to do the grind.
Yeah, you do. You have to, hard work is there, it's nothing's easy. And I think some people, I've had it where people look at me and they're like, oh, it's like they think that it's been handed to me, but I've done everything on my own to get there. And I was like, well, how have I retrained and re-educated myself? It's because I got up and I chose to find that education. I chose to spend a day to say, right, what do I want to do with my life? How can I transfer my skills? Yes, I'm a chef. I know all about food. How do I then transfer it? Right. Oh, nutrition. Oh, culinary medicine. What does that mean? Right. Blending the art of food with medicine. Right. This is brilliant. It's a different thing, So it's constantly evolving. We have to evolve as a species. You can't stay where you are. Growth is so important. And I think I felt that, when I left South Africa, I had to grow because the mindset was different. The outlook, the way we grew up, saw things. I mean, now when I travel, I see things so differently. I view people differently, cultures differently. Whereas some people, friends and family don't see it the same way I do, but they haven't had the same exposure. So I would say expose yourself, put yourself in those difficult situations. Don't be scared to, sitting on a plane or you're at an airport and strike up a conversation. You don't know where that could lead. I've met
Yeah.
so many incredible people by just having a conversation, and
Yeah, I think that I hear so often, and in a lot of these interviews, people the miracle of just talking to
yeah,
people in queues, in
yeah,
lines, in the public, and often I mean, people always say to me, "How do you find your guests?" And that is how I find my guests. Obviously,
cool,
it's through
yeah,
numerous avenues, but that's definitely one way. It's because I always believe like you're put next to someone for a reason, whether it's in a queue or an airplane seat,
yeah.
or there's always a reason why the universe is putting you next to someone. So I want to find out why, you know?
But Jen,
But
when you say that, you remind me of something. And we were sailing from Alaska. It was Russia to Alaska, and it's a very rough sea. That's where they filmed A Perfect Storm. And the ship was in chaos for like 3 days. We're all in our cabins. I thought I was going to die, and I made a deal with God. And I was like, right, I'm going to get off the ship, but I needed confirmation. I said, please give me confirmation that I'm doing the right thing. So I was in San Francisco getting on my flight, and I was in a queue, and there was this lady in front of me, and I can't remember what happened. I think I bumped into her. You move in your case and you walking around. She turned around. We had this conversation. She just turned around to me and she said, "You're doing the right thing," right? A random stranger. She became somebody that I got to know. We were going on the same flight, and she's like, "I'd love to work with you." But she was like an intuitive healer, somebody who could see things. And I mean, I was just like, well, that was my confirmation. I was doing the right thing to get on that plane and move on. So it does happen, if the power of intention is really, really, it's strong. It's very strong.
Well, I think that's a nice place to end. And I think maybe you need to contact that woman now for this next stage of your journey.
Absolutely. I think so. Just see where
right?
Yeah, no, definitely. No.
Cool, man, Halima. Oh, it's been so
lovely.
nice to chat.
And you. Thank you, Jen, for this opportunity. Thank you so much.
So guys, that's it for this week. Thanks for listening. Share the show with all your family and friends, as I always